Thank you very much. For the Harav, Rabbanim, Shluchis, and all the wonderful souls gathered here. You mentioned getting out of my comfort zone. It's pretty comfortable here too, I notice. I guess our standards for comfort zones have changed. I mentioned it because as Racha Protis, by divine providence, I saw a yechidus, a private audience, that someone wrote up a few lines of what they heard from the Rebbe in yechidus in his private audience in the summer of 1964. A very sharp few words. And then actually I looked around the Rebbe's talks, where often the Rebbe's themes in a period of time were similar. Then one of the Farbrengen, the Rebbe actually says it almost word for word. And this is what the Rebbe writes. The Rebbe said, this is what he wrote up, of what the Rebbe told him in the Yechidus. And I think this alone can be the basis of an entire Farbrengen. It speaks for itself. The Rebbe says, I'll just translate it from the Yiddish into the English, even though in Yiddish it's even more powerful and scathing. The Rebbe says to him that the Jews have gone through every challenge, every nisayon, every test. We've gone through the test and challenge of poverty. We've gone through the test and challenge of oppression. We've gone through the test and challenge of different temptations. And now we have the final challenge. And it's the challenge of, the Rebbe uses the word Freiheit, freedom. Freedom. I'll say this in Yiddish and then I'll translate. The Rebbe says, Der Eberste sagt Ihnen, not euch Freiheit, und lass mir sehen, was ihr tun mit dem. Not euch Freiheit, und lass mir sehen, sie wollen Mashiach. God tells the people, the Jews, here's freedom, and let's see whether you'll want Mashiach. And the Rebbe continues and says, so Mashiach won't come from North Africa, Morocco, and the Soviet Union. Is going to come from America and from Australia, because that's where there's the real Freiheit, the real freedom. And unfortunately, and this the Rebbe concludes this Yechidus, at least this piece, unfortunately we are not withstanding the test. 1964. So let me translate this in simple English. And since we're all insiders here, I hope you don't mind, I'm being irreverent and informal. That's what a Farbrengen is about. There's an English word called complacency. There's another word called apathy. In Yiddish, there's a very poetic word called Gleichgültigkeit. They all mean the same thing. It's essentially a form of indifference. And if we could capture the Rebbe's war, if you wish, from the beginning of his leadership till this day, was a war against complacency. You see, all the Rebbes before the Rebbe, starting from the Frierdiker Rebbe going back, and actually all the leaders, frankly, all the way back to Matan Torah, they never had to deal with complacency, really. There was no time, and there was life was too difficult to afford anyone to be complacent. The Frierdiker Rebbe was basically running for his life, as was Chassidim, for almost 30 years of his leadership. First in the Soviet Union, from the Bolsheviks and the rest of Gimmel Tammuz, that would lead to the liberation of Gimmel Tammuz. Then in Europe, from the Nazis. And the United States, the challenges he had in the middle of World War II, you're talking about the Holocaust. And every generation, literally, and our parents and grandparents are testimony to this, suffered. So there was really no time for leisure and no time for comfort and comfort zones. Is the Rebbe who assumed leadership in 1950, just a few years after World War II. So imagine the scene. World War II end, the worst chapter in Jewish history possibly. And now the Rebbe leads a generation which would become the most prosperous generation, with none of these nisayonos, not at all. Everything ceased. There was no longer the problem with Nazis. There was no longer the United States, America, the rest of the world, except the Soviet Union was still a prison. But basically the Rebbe's leadership in New York had no opposition. But he had to deal with now a new klippa, a new challenge, which one can say is even harder than the other ones. Because when you have an identified enemy, the enemy forces you to crystallize your sense of urgency and your mission. But when it's complacency, then the enemy is within. I could personally be witness to tens, if not hundreds of times the Rebbe would say the Farbrengen. I remember one specific vivid words that the Rebbe said, I'm sitting here and I feel like I'm in a refrigerator. And then he actually used the word in Hebrew too, makarer, which is a Hebrew word for refrigerator. And then he used on the other, which is a Russian word. And the Rebbe explained 3 levels of refrigeration, one colder than the next. He could talk and talk and talk, as the Rebbe would say, and lepoga v'lei nog. No one has changed. Everyone goes back home. Everyone goes back to using an expression from the Torah, ish tachas gafne, ish tachas teinase, which means person sits under his vineyard or under his fig tree. So it's usually seen as a blessing. There's no war. The time of peace, everyone's comfortable under their shade of their trees, in their hammock, in modern lingo. But the Rebbe said also there's another side to it, which is a deep darkness. Everybody is complacent and comfortable. And as I said as a witness, and I'm sure many people here witnessed it equally, I saw this as the number one enemy for the Rebbe. People wondered why the Rebbe was so demanding. As much as you accomplished, he always wanted more. There was no vacation period. All the other Rebbes, even you can't say it was vacation, dacha, because they went and everything has a divine purpose, but they did travel. They traveled for months in the summer, in the winter, and the Rebbe, unceasingly, you can say, I once told this to a journalist and he was like, pretty shocked. You can say that, how many people can you say this about? Nobody on earth. That what was the Rebbe doing, let's say, Tuesday afternoon, July 5th, 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Everyone here who knows the Rebbe can tell you exactly what he was doing. No person on earth can even tell you what they were doing a week ago. As a matter of fact, many people don't want to even know what they were doing a week ago. So here's a man that was on call 24/7. I remember times walking home late at night, after midnight, after 2 o'clock, after 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, and those years after 1988, after Jacobson passed away, the Rebbe, as you know, lived in 770 in his room. And sometimes I would pass by and see the lights on. And literally, you could cry for a man that literally all of us have, a weekend, a night. We work hard and then we reward ourselves. Here's a person completely 24/7 on call. And we ask a klotzkash, a simple question. Why? What was the necessity for such intensity? Obviously it's admirable, but you don't see it with any other Rebbes. So I'll share on my own little sentiment here, and you could disagree, that's what Farbrengens are about, so that's your call. Or you could agree, or add to it, and that is that the Rebbe's war was with complacency. And the best way to fight a war with complacency is that there's no room for 1 second of complacency or comfort. Rabbi Moshe Hecht was a long-time shliach back from the previous Rebbe's times. Lived in New Haven, Connecticut. Now his son took over, built a school there, community. The Hecht brothers, the famous Hecht brothers. He was the second of Shlomo Zalman, was in Chicago, and he was in New Haven. And I heard the story from him and from others. So the Rebbe was asking him to go build a school in New Haven. And building a school isn't a small effort. So he took his time, tried hard, but it didn't work. Every time he'd write something to the Rebbe, every time he saw the Rebbe would always demand, know what's going on with the school. To the point that he started avoiding the Rebbe. He didn't want to have to, feel guilty. And every time he has to come to the Rebbe, no matter what he said, whatever he reported, the Rebbe was always the school. So finally the day comes after several years. He collected enough money, the school was going up, and he had 250 kids enrolled. He came flying down from New Haven, came driving down the 95 to New York to report to the Rebbe. After Mincha, after the Rebbe's afternoon service, the Rebbe would go back to his room. So he was waiting there on the side in the room before the Rebbe's room. It's called Gan Eden HaTachta, the chamber, the hall right before the Rebbe's room. And he's all excited. Finally he can get this off his chest. He doesn't have to avoid the Rebbe anymore. He's standing there and he tells the Rebbe, the dream has come true, whatever you expected, which is the school, and we have 250 kids enrolled. He made sure he had to add that, because not just to have a school, you have to have kids in the school. And the Rebbe gave him this big smile and said to him in Yiddish, he said, you think you're ever going to make me happy? In other words, no matter what. And it wasn't a joke. It was, in my opinion, it was the battle. Every generation has its enemy. And our enemy is one of the hardest ones to fight because it's within. And it happens to also be part of the blessing. God forbid, we don't want to turn the clock back to a time where we need to be on our toes and constantly in fear of an enemy. God forbid. So it's part of our blessing, the comfort that we have. But it's also our challenge. And especially now, I come here from New York, I always think to myself, I'm going to stand here and speak and share a few words with you. I don't see myself as holier than you. We're all in the same boat. The only thing is that perhaps I had the merit to sit at the feet for many years of the Rebbe. And I can't even say something rubbed off, to be honest. What I'd rather say is, but I witnessed greatness. And I witnessed the truth. And witnessed this absolute non-complacency. So I feel as a debt from here to share. To me, that is our biggest challenge. It's very easy to be comfortable today. And I'm sure everybody here is still doing many mitzvahs, giving a lot of charity, gashmias, financially, time, building families. We all know life is not easy. I'm not suggesting that we all have writing everything is easy. But we don't have one thing, is we don't have a defined enemy. We don't have a Stalin, we don't have a Hitler. I know some people mention, what about the Muslims? What about the Middle East? I understand that is absolutely true, and God forbid we saw what happened last week. Like, we should only have peace and only good news to share all the time. So I'm not suggesting we have the Geula and we still have to lock our doors, so to speak. But spiritually speaking, we have no challenge. No, there are no decrees. We can have a Farbrengen here all night. Nobody's waiting outside to arrest us. Nobody's taking our names down. This was not the case in the times of the Friedrich Rebbe. My own father, so it's not just a story, would tell me how they went to sleep in fear, and they woke up in fear, and they trembled all day in fear, because anybody could be arrested at any given moment for no other reason but being Jewish. And we don't have to remind ourselves what 70 years ago in Europe what was going on. Today we don't have any of that. Today you can be as Jewish, as Chassidish, as Yiddish Shemaim as much as you wish. There's no force outside stopping you. But complacency is an enemy that's very difficult to fight. And without mentioning that at least, or at least opening with this, I think any Farbrengen really has no meaning. Because if we go back to our complacent selves, what have we accomplished? A few good, nice stories, songs, some inspiration, great. Try my best. But I think, I say this to myself as I say to you, if something doesn't shake us up in a good way, then what is Gimmel Tammuz, and what is Chav Chesiv, and what are all these days altogether for, if not that? So, I don't know if these words are enough, honestly, because as I remember once at Farbrengen, I think it was Rosh Chodesh Adar Tov Shem Mem. So this would be the 30th year of the Rebbe's leadership, 1980. Right? The month of beginning of Adar. So I remember it was a Farbrengen. It was a very, there were Farbrengens what we call, the Rebbe was far more open and less formal. That was one of those Farbrengens. The Rebbe spoke very openly about certain things. And one of the things the Rebbe spoke about was this thing called conformity. So they're speaking for hours and hours and for years and years. And the Rebbe mentioned 30 years that I'm already speaking. And I wondered to myself, what impact did it really make? And the Rebbe wasn't trying to be humble. And he wasn't talking about shlichus and the organizations built. The Rebbe understood as well as anyone what he had inspired and accomplished. But he was making, what effect am I having on individuals? He said it in that fashion. And then he suddenly told a story. Told a story that at the time of the Rebbe Marash, when he would say a Maimer, the Rebbe Marash, the fourth Chabad Rebbe, when he said a Maimer Chassidus, sometimes it was a longer Maimer, sometimes a shorter one. And there were times that some people fell asleep in the middle of the Maimer. This is the Rebbe telling the story. So there was a Gabbai there. A Gabbai was, how do you translate a Gabbai? A guy that, what do we call a Gabbai today? Any of the distinguished rabbis? Translation of Gabbai? Not a beatnik. Whatever. a gabbai. Seems like the person makes sure that things are going well, taking care of the place. So he would go around with a very sharp, he had a snuff box, a very sharp tobacco that would, like smelling salts, and go over to the people sleeping and wake them up. That's what the Rebbe said. And these are the Rebbe's words. He said, today, I don't know if it'll help. As a matter of fact, someone doing that may be in danger, because if they do that, someone's annoyed. They may react violently. And one more thing, I missed one key thing. He said he would lock the doors, and then he would go around with that snuff box, so nobody could run away. That's what the Rebbe said. So the Rebbe said, today I don't know if we can do that, because as I said, it could even be dangerous. And to lock the doors, probably people will break them down. So today we have to take the snuff box, each one to themselves, and wake ourselves up. Those were the Rebbe's words, which was interesting. In other words, he was not going to impose himself or appoint somebody to impose himself. He says you have to wake yourself up, which of course is a central theme in the Rebbe's entire leadership, which we'll talk about, I'm sure, as this evening goes on. But that is the challenge today. And I thought seeing this Yechidus of 1964, I thought it was divine providence to share, because this issue is not just a Toronto issue, I can assure you. It's a New York issue as well, and for that matter, it's an issue across the entire globe. So don't think you're in it alone. We all suffer from this. And this doesn't take away. I want to just begin by saying very clear, I'm not here to say Musar. I'm not here to reprimand anyone. As I said, I'm speaking to all of us, and myself included. And this is what we need to, if we're going to be honest with ourselves, we need to be honest about our challenge. This is a big challenge. I'm not even going to ask the question, which is obvious, that when's the last time anyone lost sleep for the Rebbe, or lost sleep when the Mashiach didn't come? You're not going to find very many people. As much as people yell and scream and people say they want it all, because we are complacent people. I remember it was, I think, Time magazine 30 years ago, maybe more even. Around in the late 80s. They wrote an article about Mashiach and Lubavitch. It was a short column. I don't know if any of you saw it back then. Everybody here looks like they're too young to have been around 1988. It's not just my vision, it's a compliment to your youth. But when I remember the article, and I saw at the end of the article, they're talking about Lubavitch, they're talking about Mashiach, the fervor. It was before Gimmel Tammuz, before Chav Zayin Adar, for sure. But I remember the end of the article was what really grabbed me. The end of the writer writes that with all the fervor and all the passion that Chabad, Lubavitch has around Mashiach, nobody has changed their summer plans. That's what he wrote. Now, you could interpret it two ways. You can interpret it in a very positive way, which is how I interpreted it, that the Rebbe did not create crazy people, that with all our belief and our faith and our waiting and doing whatever we can to bring the Gula, we're not just standing at subway stations, at train stations, or at airports waiting for Mashiach to arrive. We continue on with our lives because that's the kavanah, that's the way it was meant to be. But you could also say that with all the talk, there is a certain element of talk, and not necessarily that it's shaking anyone up. Now, I don't think the Rebbe did not win the war against complacency. I don't think a talk here in Toronto tonight is going to do it, obviously. However, I think we can talk about it. They tell the story about a story. What's the power of a Chassidish story? So they say that the Baal Shem Tov had a custom that before every Rosh Hashanah he would go out to a certain place in the field, light a fire, and say certain tefillos, prayers for a Shana Teva, for a good year. The Maggid is his student, because the next generation would also go to the same location, but he didn't know how to light the fire the way the Baal Shem Tov did, so he would just say the tefillos, the prayers, and stand there. The next generation, the Talmidei, the students of the Maggid, they knew the location, but they didn't know how to light the fire. They also didn't know the prayers, so they just stood there quietly. What about us? We don't know the location. We don't know how to light the fire. We don't know the prayers. We don't even know the location. So what do? We tell the story. So a Chassidish story isn't just a nice, inspiring, commemorating an event that happened and we just share with each other what happened. It's actually what we can do to recreate the experience. That's the power of a Chassidish Maaseh. We're recreating it. So to say that we can change everything overnight, I wish that were true. But not to talk about it is not acceptable. Just because we can say, hey, people are really going to change from 112 from Farbrengen, and another year Gimmel Tammuz coming. Hopefully it doesn't come in the way it has been coming, but in a positive way. But we can talk about it, and that there's no excuse for not to speak about it. The Friedrich Rebbe once said, it's hard to speak, but it's harder to be silent. So that's what we're here for, and what I'm trying to do is be the guy in the microphone, and hopefully I can say words that we all should be saying to each other and ourselves, and words that wake us up from called the lull of complacency. That is the biggest challenge. You get someone out of that place, you can change worlds. As the Rebbe did with complacent people, not necessarily on the highest level, some would even be categorized as mediocre. And the Rebbe took a generation and was able to do something with it. Could it be much better? Obviously. But it's a tremendous achievement to get complacent people to do something. It's not so difficult to get someone who's already awake to act. And I think that, to me at least, is the great challenge of our time in general. Specifically as the years roll on, we're 22 years, who would believe, God forbid, 22 years since Gimmel Tammuz in 1994. Now in 2016. And I don't know if this is an appropriate thing to say, but I say to myself, listen, if 22 years can pass, why can't another 22 years pass? God forbid. They say insanity is doing the same thing and expecting different results. So I feel this is my responsibility, at least, and I hope I'm not disturbing the Rabbi Gansberg. You're the one that got me to come here, so I hope I'm not shaking up or rocking the boat here in any way. But anyway, I go back tomorrow to New York, so it'll be, I'm a guest. If I do, so be it. And I think that would actually be successful. So the question is, what is it that we can do differently? That will not just be a repeat of what's happened till now. And at the end of the day, it's results. You can take all day, say, have good intentions, but at the end of the day, the Rebbe said results. Intentions are beautiful, results. That's what I would like to address and try to challenge myself you ask the tough questions, and you're forced to have to try to answer them. So I'm not here to just ask questions, I'm here to also make some suggestions, and hopefully, more importantly, is to provoke you and provoke myself, because that's how you get out of complacency, through provocation, to do something differently. When I say different, I don't mean new. We have a Torah, we have mitzvahs, we have the Rebbe's directives, but do something with a new way that will not be complacent. And my dear friends, I don't know if there's a greater gift you can give your children than showing them you're passionate about something. Complacency of all curses is the greatest curse, is the impact that it has on our families. Because then our children grow up and say, hey, you know what? Apathy is an option. What did the guys say? The guy said, I used to think I'm indecisive, now I'm not so sure. The worst thing you can give your children is indecision and apathy. Because that becomes a way, also it's a method. It's another approach to deal with life. You know what? There are people who make a move, people who don't make a move, and there are people who are undecided. We'll see what happens. And I think that is one thing that we cannot allow happen to ourselves and to our own families. So if anything is a wake-up call, Gimmel Tammuz is the best one of all. Because maybe that's not a good word to use actually, but because there's nothing that we find positive about that day exactly. Because 22 years ago, something happened, however you want to interpret it, and I'm sure there are many philosophers that have their own interpretations, but one thing for sure, it's not exactly a positive. We'd rather be sitting here, instead of listening to me, or to other speakers around the world, sitting Farbrengen with the Rebbe in New York, and seeing the Rebbe's face, glowing face, and be inspired by him, not just through a video, but in real time. And that Gimmel Tammuz is effective no matter what. How you interpret it is another story. So, when something like that happens, what is the approach? What approach do we take to a day that is so inexplicable? And we could either sit and cry, as some may do. Some people go into a deeper state of apathy because they can't handle crying. And most say, pick up their hands and say, what are we supposed to do? How we get together and feel a little like a Farbrengen. Some people come to New York. A lot of people come to New York actually. But then the Gimmel Tammuz passes and comes Dalel Tammuz, and then another year passes. One of the most, I'd say devastating maybe, one of the most dramatic lines I read from the Rebbe. There's a letter he writes for Chodesh Shvat, Tovshin Yud Aleph. This is almost a year from the Stalkus and passing of the Frierdiker Rebbe. So the Rebbe wrote a letter, and in the letter he writes, it's printed, but he writes one line there that really is can shake you up a bit. He says, "Over Kayetz, summer has passed, and Kolak Chedef, and the winter has passed. V'Hazman Esa Es Asher Sholei, and time does its thing." In other words, with time, everything settles back into some type of, routine. And the Rebbe is not writing it in a positive way. That, there was a devastating day called Yud Shvat, and a year has passed, and time does its thing. Now, frankly, there's a certain quality to that. God makes it that we can't live in trauma and shock all the time. It's important that time pass, and we become able to survive. I'm not denying that power, but it becomes easy to just go back to a routine. So how do we look at a day like this? We don't even have a precedent, really, because there's never been a Gimmel Tammuz before where we didn't have another Rebbe. Frierdiker Rebbe Yud Shvat, but it led to V'zarach HaShemesh, Bo HaShemesh. The sun set, but the sun also rose. Frierdiker Rebbe followed the Frierdiker Rebbe. The Frierdiker Rebbe followed his father, the Rebbe Rashab. So really have an unprecedented, it's like uncharted territory. And you look in the Sikhs, you can find hints here and there, but it's not like something specific. But at the same time, we're also told by the Rebbe himself that a Rebbe would never forsake his chassidim, his flock. So that means that it has to be something from the Rebbe himself that gives us some guidance. You have to say that. We don't have to come up with our own innovations. Again, not necessarily because the Rebbe is hinting to a Gimmel Tammuz. I have not found such a hint. Even though after the fact everybody thinks that they can find all kinds of hints. But there has to be direction. That's just an impossibility from the Rebbe's point of view that a Rebbe would leave his flock. It's clear. And Afkanu Emid Mishamish, Malahal Emid Mishamish Afkan, meaning just as he led, then he continues to lead. So where do you turn to? So firstly, I think it's important, just in general, to look at how the Rebbe looks at challenging situations. And I think, I don't have to say this, but I'll say it anyway. It's obvious. In every possible scenario, there is not one exception where somebody wrote to the Rebbe about a challenging situation, a loss, a death, some other trauma. You always have one consistent response. There's no such thing as lying down and dying. There's no such thing as resignation. There's no such thing as, what do we do? There's never such a response. It's consistently that if you're given a challenge, you're given all the strength you need to deal with this challenge. And there has to be something that leads, something positive comes out of it. This is consistent. There's not one exception. So if the Rebbe was here right now, and he is, I'm sure, here right now, and you asked him, what is Gimmel Tammuz supposed to be doing? It has to be something, it happened to us, something has to be elicited. Something positive. And I'll share a few anecdotes that just support this. Some you may have heard, some have not, but they're very powerful. One second, before we continue, Rabbi Shpalta, what's the say there? How do we go here? We take breaks, we sing a niggin,
10 o'clock is Ma'ariv.
10 o'clock is Ma'ariv. 10 o'clock tonight, you mean? No, I'm just asking how the...
It's a break for Ma'ariv.
Okay, that's an hour and 10 minutes. I'm talking about till then. Okay, so I'll tell you a few stories. Then maybe we'll sing a niggin. Why not? And then I'll continue, hopefully, with Hashem. So, about difficult situations. So let's start with the non-particular order. Chief Rabbi Lau, the Israeli former Chief Rabbi, Yisrael Meir Lau, who I heard the story directly from personally, firsthand. I think he's repeated it a number of times in public. So 1974 was the first time he came to see the Rebbe. He was then a rabbi of Netanya. Okay? Today is the Chief Rabbi of Tel Aviv. In 1974 was right after the Yom Kippur War in Israel. So the Rebbe asked him in the Yechidus, in the private audience, the Rebbe said to him, so what is the matzav ruach? What is the mood like in Israel now? And he said to the Rebbe that it's very down. People are very motorshchered, they're very depressed. And they're all asking, was wird sein? What will be? The way he tells the story is the Rebbe grabbed his wrist, Lau's wrist that is, and said to him, Iden fragen nicht was wird sein, man fragt was geht man tun. Jews don't ask what will be, they ask what are we going to do about it. Ma, not ma, yeah, but ma naseh. A victim, I'm explaining, this is the Rebbe's words, a victim, and I have to remember before I go on, there was a mood like that, because after, in stark contrast to 6-day war, which was a mood of euphoria, because it was literally a miracle in 6 days, what they were able to accomplish with so few casualties. And the Yom Kippur War was very different. There was a lot of arrogance, mistakes were made. In the first days of the war, it was not looking good. There were over 2,000 casualties, which was a tremendous number for a country like that size. So the mood was very bad. And that's what the Rebbe said to him. A victim asks a question, what will be? A leader never asks such a question. A commander-in-chief will never ask what will be. He's going to figure out a strategy, even if there's a setback, even if the enemy wins a battle. There's no such thing as what will be. And the Rebbe taught us also to answer that way. Another story that captures it in a similar, different way. There was a midwinter, they have a Sheikh Chabad convention every midwinter, different cities. This one was in Detroit, Michigan. And the convention ended Thursday, and all the women were coming back to New York, the New York women that is, for Shabbos. It was a big snowstorm. And the women wrote a note to the Rebbe saying, we're stuck in the snow. You know who doesn't use that expression? Stuck in the snow. And the word stuck with us forever. The word stuck, the Rebbe circled the word stuck and wrote La'ilam, I never saw any Jew ever use such a word called stuck. And the Rebbe continues in a nice long note writing, and I'll translate again from Hebrew. The Rebbe writes that I'm sure that all of you are believe in Hashgacha Pratis and divine providence, and moreover you probably talked about it at the convention to other women, but you forgot to take the lesson to yourselves that there's no such thing as being stuck. Everything is divine providence. So if you're there because of the snow, it means it's a sign from heaven. And the Rebbe continues and says, and snow actually falls from heaven, so it's clearly a sign from heaven. That means that you haven't finished your job there. Whether at the airport or on the way to the airport or back in the city, you have more work to do. When you finish your work, you'll be allowed to come home. And that's what happened. They started doing whatever they did. I'm not sure what they did, but it came Sunday, the snow was over, and they wrote back to the Rebbe, so the Rebbe sends that they can come back. And the Rebbe said, clearly you finished your job, so the snow could stop. And finally, a third story, and there are hundreds like this, I'm just sharing a few, happened with me personally. My father, Olav Shalom, was the editor and publisher of the Algemein, as mentioned before. He had a close relationship, if you can call it that, with the Rebbe. So the year was Tov Shinun, it would be 1989, and he had his mini stroke right before Rosh Hashanah. He ended up in the hospital, Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. For those that have good memories, you may remember that was the only year the Rebbe had a Farbrengen, and also the first day of Rosh Hashanah. The secretary told me that they think it was in honor of my father. Okay. I went over to the Rebbe Erev Yom Kippur for Lekach. Lekach is the honey cake for a blessing for New Year. I went for my father, not for myself. And the Rebbe gave me a honey cake and told me to tell my father I should have a blessed and sweet year. And then he added, Zogyan, tell your father that when he finishes his shlichus, his mission in the hospital, God will release him from there. That was the Rebbe's words. So I went straight to the hospital. I told him these words. My mother, may she be well, she's made good healthy years. My mother began running around and doing miftzayim in the hospital. My father called her back and said, the Rebbe gave me this mission, not you. I'm in the hospital, you're just visiting me. This thing is falling, okay. And okay, so that was that. I don't know if he could stop my mother from doing anything, but it says it's my mission. Anyway, my father did whatever he did. After Yom Kippur, just to show it wasn't a joke, Rabbi Chalikov, the Rebbe's chief of staff, his main secretary, came to see my father the day after Yom Kippur. He tells my father, the Rebbe's asking whether you finished your mission yet. So the theme continued. Well, obviously he did at some point because he was released. Now tell me what this means. A man is in the hospital because he had a stroke. And the doctor said that he better be there because it's danger of having a more serious stroke. And there's no doubt that was the reality. And yet the Rebbe sees a deeper reason. A stroke. The Rebbe did not deny that there was a stroke. He didn't say, no, don't take the medication or don't listen to doctor's orders. But there's a deeper reason. Clear that every story in life has what we call an inner choreography. Is what you see and what you don't see. Now, as we get older, most of us realize that we see less, not more. You realize that we have a little image of what's going on in the here and now. The bigger picture, who knows what the bigger picture is. Gimmel Tammuz, no question, falls into the category of the unknown. Everybody can come up with all kinds of theories, but it's unknown. And I'm not here to come and explain something that I don't think has an explanation. I don't know what God's plan is. I don't know what the purpose of it was and who needed it. Why wouldn't the Rebbe, why wouldn't the Eibishter, after the Rebbe gave his life literally in every possible way to bring the Gula, just let it happen in a calm and peaceful way? I have no answer to this question. But I know unequivocally, without even doubt, what the Rebbe's response would be. That which we don't know, we don't know. The Holocaust is also an inexplicable one. I saw a letter to a doctor. It's a lesser known letter the Rebbe writes to a doctor who asked the Rebbe why. The big why with a big question mark. And the Rebbe's answer to the doctor is, it's an English letter, it says, we don't know why. And the mere fact that we don't know why tells you that we don't need to know why, because if we needed to know, God would have told us why. That means you can do what you have to do without having that answer. So we have to figure out what to do, as he told Rabbi Lau. Why? We may never know why. So that's an attitude of a leader. That's the attitude that is proactive, action-oriented. The question is, what are you going to do about it? Just because you have a why, if it slows you down or stops you from doing something, clearly that's not, as the Rebbe would say, that's not coming from the Yetzer Tov, from the good side. So that's the first thing, that a Gimmel Tammuz has to provoke us into realizing that there's something that we must do. The question is what? Okay, so since I have you in suspense, let's take a little break and sing a song, and I'll talk about the what. Trying to base on other talks from the Rebbe. L'chaim to you all. With my l'chaim, say l'chaim when I get back here. L'chaim, and we'll resume just after a song, okay? Very nice, I didn't get to the main question. Let's go, my friends. Okay. So, l'chaim. So, what is it that we can do? That is, of course, based on the Rebbe's own words, not any, as I said, our own innovations. And frankly, like questions like this, even though they're big ones, sometimes they are very simple to find the answers. Before I get that, I want to just share a few things which maybe will help us all. First, on a humorous note, after my book Torah Meaningful Life was published, which was, as Rabbi Spalta mentioned before, it was actually right after Gimmel Tammuz. It was 1995, and I was a yeshiva bacher. My years, then I was already married with family, but what I knew about the book business was very little. And when the publisher told me I have to go on a book tour, which means traveling around and going to bookstores, I really had no clue what it was. But I did what I was told, and they sent me to bookstores all across the country, United States, Canada as well. It began as a 20-city book tour, but it was very successful, meaning there were crowds of over 100 people were coming out to each of the events, which is a large number for these type of events. So they turned it to 90 cities. I ended up being in 90 cities. And I can't, we don't have enough time for me to share with you the amazing interactions I had, because this was a rare opportunity of two worlds coming together. Because in bookstores you meet people who will not walk into a Chabad house or a synagogue or a JCC or a Jewish environment. They just, it's the average Jew, assimilated Jew that has no affiliation. People you don't meet every day. And here, people were coming, some weren't even coming to hear me, but they came in to get a coffee or to buy an order repair manual, and I happened to be speaking. So, there were a lot of powerful stories that took place, but one that stands out, I guess you can call it a Gimmel Tammuz type of story. It happened of all places in Lexington, Kentucky. You've heard of this place? Lexington, Kentucky, I think till this day doesn't even have a Chabad Shliach. There's one in Louisville, Kentucky, Litwin, but in Lexington, because Lexington, well, it's not because there's so few Jews. There are less Jews in Lexington than sitting in this room right now. But that doesn't stop Chabad. There are Chabad houses where there's only one Jew sometimes, or two. But it happens to be there's no Chabad house there, just mentioning that. So I went, it was a independent bookstore called Joseph Beth. It's not relevant to the story, I'm just giving you the details. And in case you're already interested in trivia, the Cincinnati airport happens to be in Kentucky, in case you need to know that. So first I spoke at a Joseph Beth chapter in Cincinnati, and an hour south is Lexington, Kentucky. I come to the Lexington, they drive me, I get out there. It wasn't a book signing as in the talk, but you go into the bookstore and you sign the books, and they put a sticker called autograph book, and for some reason it makes it sell more. So I go in there, the person standing at the desk, at the front desk of the store, says to me, so what's the name of your book? I said, Torah Meaningful Life. Okay, she looks it up on the computer, and here's where it gets interesting. And I see suddenly she turns pale, and like very disturbed, and she gets on the phone, and I hear her whispering. She was thinking I didn't hear what she was saying, but I did hear. She whispers to the manager, obviously upstairs, and says, Rabbi Schneerson is back. I kid you not. So I immediately understood, because on the book it says the wisdom of the Torah Meaningful Life, the wisdom of the Rebbe, Menachem Mendel Schneerson. And then on the bottom in small print is my name by Simon Jacobson. So the manager comes running downstairs, and I make believe like I didn't know anything, and they're like starting to cater to me. You want a coffee, Rabbi? We'll call the media. So I decided, how many opportunities like this in a lifetime do you have? to play like a Rebbe, I wanted to see what it feels like for a few minutes. So I decided, I'm saying this half tongue-in-cheek, but this is exactly what happened. So I play along for a minute, not too long. I felt it was too much responsibility. I'm not taking this job. And I finally, you can imagine, of course, these two women were not Jewish. I'm sure you can figure that out, right? No Jew would ever believe that. Okay, good. Yeah, thank you. So I finally told them, I said, I don't want to disappoint you, but I happen to be not Rabbi Schneers, and I'm Rabbi Jacobson, I work for Rabbi Schneers. And they were disappointed. I'm not giving you any commentary on the story, you can read anything you like, but this is what happened. This is one interesting Lexington, Kentucky story. However, it did remind me of something interestingly. And there's a sikha from the Rebbe, Shabbos Pasha Ekev, Tovshin Yud Gimmel. I wasn't there, I wasn't even born yet. Rabbi Shachat, were you there? Shabbos Pasha Ekev, Tovshin Yud Gimmel? Oh, there we have. Anyway, it's a printed sikha today. Obviously the Rebbe says it on Shabbos. And the Rebbe says something really powerful. He's speaking about Yud Shvat. And he says that the Rebbe's relationship with the Chassid is dependent on the Chassid. How you want the Rebbe in your life, that's how he'll come to you in your life. If you want a Rebbe that's in Gan Eden, Hatachten or Gan Eden Elyon or wherever he is, so Hashem will show you how he's a great Rebbe in heaven and continues to elevate there. But if you want a Rebbe down here on earth, it's your choice. Then Hashem will show you that the Rebbe is with you. That's the gist of it. And it reminds us of another story, of a Friedrich Rebbe story. There were two Jews, Askonim, two, activists in a particular town, who came to the Friedrich Rebbe when he was still in Poland. And they went to Yechidus. And they both were from the same town, they both evolved there. And one chassid said to the Rebbe said, what's the status of Jewish life in your town? And he said, it's challenging, but thank God, Rebbe, we were able to establish a minyan, we have some classes, shiurim and chassidus, other positive things. And the Rebbe took out from his drawer a few dollars, or whatever it was, not dollars, I should correct myself, whatever it was, the coins of that country, the currency of that place, and said, I want to be mishtatev. I want to participate, and he gave him something to participate. When he came out of Yechidus, he tells his colleague what just happened, and the colleague said, you should have told the Rebbe how bad it is, and he would have given you more money. He said, no, I told the Rebbe what I wanted to tell the Rebbe. The second fellow goes in, Friedrich Rebbe asks him the same question and says to him, so tell me, what's the status of Jewish life in your city? And he starts giving him, he says, Jews are busy going to theaters and partying, and no one wants to come to minyan, no one wants to come to shiurim, and so on. Gives us whole paint this really negative picture. So the Friedrich Rebbe gives him a bracha and says, God should bless, that it should get better, something like that. He's about to walk out of the Yechidus, and he said to himself, let him have a little chutzpah, and he says to the Friedrich Rebbe, he says, my chaver was judged by you, and the Rebbe gave a ishtafus, a participation. Why is the Rebbe not giving me a participation? So the Friedrich Rebbe said to him, you think I asked you about the status of your city because I don't know what's going on in your city? I know what's going on in your city. I wanted to know what's going on by you, where your head is. So the first chassid's head was building minyanim. Your head is in the theaters and all the challenges. That is the conclusion. So a relationship with the Rebbe is much more complex than a one-way street, where the Rebbe is some type of crutch who was just going to do the work for us, and we sit around waiting for brachas to be bestowed upon us. It would be very nice, but that's for children. A mature relationship with the Rebbe is a far more symbiotic one. We create the relationship. Exactly that. And if we're not there, if our head is not there, wherever our head is, that's how the Rebbe's relationship will be with us. Now maybe before Gimmel Tammuz, it was maybe different. Today, for sure, that's the only option. Because then the Rebbe did what he wanted to do, and we had the choice to be participating or not. Today, it's completely up to us, so to speak. We'll talk about that more, but in a revealed way. So that's the real challenge today, is what are we going to do? And how are we going to deal with it? I want to share with you another two stories that I heard recently from times of the Tzemach Tzedek. And I think they're very, very relevant to our times. Number one is, and I heard in the name of Shmuel Levitin, who himself, his father was a Mashiach in Lubavitch, and so on. So it goes pretty straight, direct line to the original source. The Tzemach Tzedek, as you know, same name, the namesake of the Rebbe, named after the Tzemach Tzedek, and the Rebbe Chaim Mushka, named after the Rebbe of the Tzemach Tzedek. And another eerie, uncanny similarity is that they were the only two Rabbeim where the Rebbetzin passed away before the Rebbe. The Rebbetzin Chaim Mushka of the Tzemach Tzedek passed away. Her stalkers was in Tafresh Chaf Aleph, 5 years before Tafresh Chavav, which now we're honoring actually 150 years of the Tzemach Tzedek's stalkers. Now, you may also know that after the Tzemach Tzedek's Rebbetzin passed away, the Tzemach Tzedek went into seclusion. He stopped saying Maimorim, he stopped coming out in public, did not take Yechidas, personal audiences, did not answer questions. He was in seclusion. And there are many stories around this, there are a number of stories around this that how the Chassidim tried to reconnect. And the Tzemach Tzedek said then a very strong statement, which was, Ein melech b'lei matre nisa. A king is not a king without his queen. And just as an aside, I will tell you that the Rebbe asked Rabbi Pekarsky, the Rav, and the Rosh Yeshiva in Lubavitch Yeshiva in 770, after the Rebbe Chaim Mushka passed away, the Rebbe asked him, Ashayla and Halacha, whether he still has a connection with the Friedrich Rebbe after his Rebbetzin passed away, because the connection was through the Rebbetzin. And of course he immediately answered yes. But you can see a question like that is not such a pleasant question. So, the Tzemach Tzedek, as I said, we don't know how long, but for a number of months he was in this state. And I'm not explaining it because I'm not here to explain things what Rebbes do, is their business. But finally, the good news came. Tzemach Tzedek announced that he's going to say a Maimer Chassidus. After months, he's coming out to say a Maimer Chassidus. Now you can imagine the simcha, the joy by the Chassidim after these months, after the Restalkos, they're all coming. Rabbi Hillel Parasher, as you know, was a great chassid of the Tzemach Tzedek. He was then already older man. He would pass away in Tafresh Chav Daled. So it was in that period of time. But when he heard about it, he came from Parish, he came. For him, a Maimer Chassidus was like, the greatest possible gift. And he was there. Everybody was waiting for the Tzemach Tzedek to come out. And an hour passed, a little more than an hour, nothing. Rabbi Hillel was very old and not well, so he had to go out. He couldn't stay there anymore. As he's walking out of the Ganei Natach, wherever they were, the room where they were waiting for the Tzemach Tzedek to arrive, he heard two young Chassidim speaking. And what they said to each other disturbed him so much, he suddenly got a new surge of energy. One Chassid said to the other, these young guys, and the words I heard was, one said, Nufas Kementan, what could you do? The Rebbe is in a state of, or Shcheda was the word, depression, withdrawn. They used an expression that they shouldn't use on a Rebbe. But they used it. Rabbi Hillel heard such words. He went over to them. He went over to these two guys and yelled at them. And this is what he said. I'll say it in Yiddish and then I'll translate it. He said, Shvenzelach, Shvenzelach, Shvenzelach. Was meint ihr? A Rebbe is eigen anoz mit amoil. A Rebbe is alakus. Und b'shas da helam of alakus, da helam of Rebbe. Now, how do we translate Shvenzelach? I guess I'm going to have to translate it in a more milder version. But if it was a full-blown Farbrengen, you probably can use stronger words. Shvenzelach literally means tails, but it also means, what can you say? Rabbi Pashan, give me a good word for Shvenzelach, huh? Okay, I can't repeat the word he was going to say. But basically it means idiots. I don't know, that's mild. I don't know who to turn to it. Anyway, use your imagination. It's not it's an expletive. It's not a positive word, but it's basically saying you're idiots. And he said it 3 times. What do you think? A Rebbe is eyes, a nose, and a mouth? A Rebbe is alakus, divinity. A Rebbe is godliness. He's a man of God. And when there's a concealment on godliness, there's a concealment on the Rebbe. Now think about these words. Today you hear, I don't want to repeat words, as I said, I don't see myself as a bigger tzaddik than anybody else. Maybe less, much less. But one thing I do know, that a Rebbe is one. And we hear sometimes words today, people say them flippantly, or they say them just nonchalantly, whatever you want to call it, that are not appropriate. I don't just mean mitzat koved and derech eretz, but it's completely missing the point. That Rebbe, what is a Rebbe? People are ready to not listen to a doctor that's telling, God forbid, you have to make an operation. If the Rebbe said don't make one, and the doctor says if you don't do it he'll die or she'll die, people are ready, life and death. And this I know many people, I'm sure many people in this room, or maybe everybody, wouldn't have even hesitated if the Rebbe said to you. What does that mean? That means that the Rebbe is speaking from a higher place, not just his opinion. So when we see a concealment on the Rebbe, which was either Chav Zayin Oder or Gimmel Tammuz, it's very clear. It's a Helam and a Lakus, and therefore there's a Helam on the Rebbe. That's the only way to understand it. As simple as that. So when you start saying, like people say things like, maybe the plan changed, God forbid, maybe it was an Eis Rotzen, and then, too bad, we missed the boat or something like that, really. So then you're basically going to take 40 years or more of the Rebbe's words and say there was wishful thinking, a nice hope that the Rebbe, Basel Gani Tavshin Yad Aleph, the Rebbe says, without even hesitation, this is the 7th generation. And not with our bchira, not with our choice, and not with our aveda and our work, and not with anything that we merited, but simply that's how it is, and this will be the generation that will go into the Gula. What are you going to do with those words? The same Rebbe that said, don't do the operation, or would tell you something, you'd listen without even hesitating. Now I'm not saying this again, I speak to myself. It's difficult, obviously, because it's easy to humanize the Rebbe, especially as time passes, and say, but you have to remember you're dealing here with emes. And I, for one, have always been an extremist. For me, I can't see how you can cut this in half. A Rebbe is a Rebbe or he's not a Rebbe. Simple as that. I have no problem, frankly, if someone tells me, you know what, I don't believe in God, I don't believe in a Rebbe, I don't believe in Torah. I have no problem. I mean to say, okay, fine, that's his axiom, that's the person's attitude or perspective, so be it. But to say you have a Rebbe and then start playing with what that means, that doesn't make any sense. There's the famous story with Shmuel Munkus, and this is a personal story that actually changed my life, to be honest. I had my Gimmel Tammuz moment in Toshin Lamed Ches when the Rebbe had a heart attack. What do I mean by that? Obviously then the Rebbe not only survived, but doubled and tripled his work. But I remember I was my prime, I was a Bochner 770, a student. It was 1977. You all know Simchas Torah night, Shmini Atzeres, the first Hakafas night, the Rebbe had a heart attack. And today we know it was a killer heart attack by the morning it came. It was really life-threatening. To the point where the Rebbe himself even alluded to it when he told one of the Chassidim a story from the Zohar that there was one of the Rabbi was supposed to be taken to heaven, and they came and asked Rachamim a compassion, and heaven gave him more alis in life. So the Rebbe referred to that in a very life-threatening way, to put it down. Now, 1977 was a very different time. It wasn't even on anyone's lips words of mortality associated with the Rebbe. It wasn't even something you could talk about. But I, in my own chatose and nimasku, which means I have my own little skepticism, and I said to myself, I remember then, I was involved then in working in the sikhs of the Rebbe. It was great times. And I said, what happens? God forbid. And I didn't say it to anyone else. It was not appropriate, so I said it to myself. I said, so what? The Rebbe is sending us shulchan. People are changing their entire lives. They're committing. And what happens if the whole thing ends right here? These are my thoughts as a 21-year-old young whippersnapper. Okay? But I'm telling you exactly what happened. Then I noticed I read then, I don't know why, but it came to me today, we have it more in detail, the story of Shmuel Munkus. The Alter Rebbe. Unbelievable story. And to me, this was a life-changing story. A game changer, as they say. And the story goes like this. I'll say it now with more detail because we have the more stories in the Rebbe's Rishimas that he wrote up. He writes it in detail. So the Alter Rebbe, of course, was arrested before Yitzhak Kislev. But the Alter Rebbe had a hiding place. This is straight from the Rishimas that the Rebbe wrote, things he heard from the Frierdiker Rebbe. Manuscripts that the Rebbe wrote. Notes. And the Alter Rebbe had a hiding place. In case there was someone coming that was dangerous, the Alter Rebbe would hide. One night, there's a knock on the window. It's the minister. It's the soldiers from the Tsar's the Tsar coming to arrest the Alter Rebbe. The Alter Rebbe went to hide in the hiding place. They came in and they started interrogating and searching. And they asked the Rebbetzin, the Alter Rebbetzin, where's the Alter Rebbe? She says she doesn't know. This Meshima goes, they slapped her to the point actually that a tooth fell out. That's what it says in the Meshima. I'm just telling you the way it's written. Okay, they left. The Alter Rebbe came out of the hiding place. A little while later, there's another knock on the window. And who is it? The Chassid Shmuel Munkus. They looked, they peeked through the window. They were frightened for a moment, then they let him in. And the Alter Rebbe says to him like this: Du kommst stech banacht. You also come at night, meaning you're also coming at night. It comes at night. The mazikim, the frightening forces, come at night. Why? You're also coming at night. So what does he tell the Alter Rebbe? I didn't know by the Rebbe there's a night, meaning that the Rebbe has anything to be afraid of. And then the Alter Rebbe asks him the following question: Should I cooperate and allow myself to be arrested or not? And the Shmuel Munkus answers. It's like shocking what he answers. But he clearly had the ability to answer this. He says to the Alter Rebbe, "Mamonavshach, either or. If you're a Rebbe, nothing will happen to you. And if you're not, you deserve." And this they take out. There's 3 dots. But I'll tell you what those 3 dots said. You deserve a bullet to your head. Chassid is saying this to Rebbe. You deserve a bullet to your head for taking away the pleasure of this world from so many Chassidim. That's Shmuel Munkus' answer to the Alter Rebbe. Now, to me, this was, I mean, at that age, I don't know, I had to hear it, that's what I heard. It was very clear to me from there on. A Rebbe is a Rebbe or is not a Rebbe. If he's a Rebbe, you don't have to understand everything. You're in or you're not in. So at age 21, I basically was drafted in, mobilized myself in, and came down to make no difference whether I understand it or not. Either you're in, you're not in. A soldier in the army doesn't make a decision. One day I'm a soldier, and tomorrow, if it's not so convenient, maybe I have other things to do. You're either in or you're not in. That was what I'd said to myself. This is a purely private story I'm sharing with you. Take it as you wish. But that was the key. A Rebbe is a lakus, and there's a helm in a lakus. There's a helm. But that makes us less soldiers, less committed. I didn't say there aren't challenges. But if you think as an adult, so what, suddenly because it didn't work out exactly as you understand it and you don't fully have answers or no answers at all, so what, the plan changes? That is very selfish and frankly very narrow-minded. As the Rebbe said many times, Imreiku, if you don't have an answer, the problem is in you, not in the emes of something. So I would rather say I'm wrong than say, God forbid, that the Rebbe and the cause is wrong. And I'm sure everybody here feels the same. But we have to sometimes articulate this. So then the question is, so what? So what exactly are we supposed to do? Besides, obviously, wake ourselves up and not be complacent. Because if that's in place, no matter what you're going to hear, whatever you're going to think of, if you're ready to go back to complacency, then that will dominate your life, and so be it, You write your own script. As I said before, today Chassidim define the reality. So, where do we find in the Rebbe's words an answer to this question? I'm going to cite a few sources. You can look them up yourselves, and maybe you'll see things even more than I'm going to share here, because these are the Rebbe's words. So let's start with 2 Farbrengens, Yud Shvat, especially Tavshin Chav Gimmel and Tavshin Chav Vav. This would be the years respectively 1963 and 1966. They're both on tape. I think they're both on tape. Chav Gimmel may have been Shabbos, but I think they're both on recording with Tzoi Shabbos, and 1966. And a few other talks which I'll soon refer to. The Rebbe says there, he's spoken of course about the Frierdiker Rebbe. Especially the 1966 one is really pretty wild, you could say. And the Rebbe says then, there's an expression, Yaakov Avinu lo mes. It's a Gemara. Yaakov did not die. That's why you don't have the word Vayomos. You don't say anywhere Vayechi when Yaakov passes away. There's no word called death. There's all kinds of other words, but not death. The Gemara asks, why? Because he didn't die. The Gemara says, but you see, he was eulogized, he was buried, he was embalmed. Chisabdu sabdaya, kavru kavraya. So how could you say he didn't die? So the Gemara answers, Mazare b'chaim afu b'chaim. Just as his children are alive, so too he is alive. I'm sure you've heard this many, many, many times. Everybody uses this. But that particular Farbrengen, 63 and 66, I think is a very unique take on this, and very emotional, but also very practical in the way. And the Rebbe says more or less what I repeated before in different terms. What is the Gemara saying exactly? The Gemara is not answering, no, he did die, but his children are alive. Because if that's the case with everybody. Avram, Yitzchak, Moshe Rabbeinu, not everybody has children. And their children keep you alive. Obviously, they're the continued your legacy. The Gemara is continuing its theme that the life of Yaakov in some way is bound to his children more than anyone else. By other people, it does say by Yomos. And the Rebbe, in a nutshell, it was really hours that the Rebbe elaborated on this, basically said the following. He said, a Rebbe, a Metzias of a Rebbe, the existence of a Rebbe is very different than the rest of us. In the sense, his whole life is dedicated to the cause. He has no private life. Actually, this theme came up very directly and was the real cause of the Heitevis victory of the court case. People wonder about that day. It's not really a Heitevis Farbrengen here, but I just want to mention it for a moment. The Rebbe writes there exactly the same thing when he gave instructions to the lawyers what the argument should be. He said, tell the court that a Rebbe's Metzias is Bittul Hayesh. He's not a personal, he's not a private citizen. His whole being is dedicated to the court. And the Rebbitzon's words were the ones that the Judge Sifton used that changed, that actually the ruling came out. What'd she say? And they asked her, who do the books belong to? The Rebbe or the Chassidim? She answered, the Rebbe himself belonged to Chassidim. That wasn't even the question. She went even further. And the Rebbe basically wrote it, and that was the whole foundation. What was the big chiddush is that a non-Jewish judge should recognize the concept of a human being that's not a private citizen is unprecedented. You know any human being that's not a private citizen? Everyone, even public figures, have private property. They have books, they have homes. They may not be wealthy, but they have something that they own. The concept of being a non-private citizen and belonging to the public, to the Chassidim, is really a very, you need to learn a lot of Chassidus to understand what that is. It's called what we call Metzias of Bittul. It's compare it to things that don't have any substance of their own. All they are a transparent channel of something greater than they are. Now we have the schus as human beings to try to connect to that, to try in some way to be sometimes a moment in our day, in our lives, to be a messenger of that. But a person at 24/7, his whole life, is a transparent channel of what the divine will is something that is very rare. That's what the Rebbe said then, that Yud Shvat. So he said, now what happens when a person like that has the Istalkus? He spoke about Yud Shvat. So he says, since even before the Istalkus, he wasn't really what you saw. What you saw was just a body, a vehicle, a container. That's not the Rebbe. As I said before from Rabbi, a Rebbe is not eyes, a nose, and a mouth. That we are Gashmis Dika people. A Rebbe, as in the words of the Geras HaKadosh, Simach of Zion says, 27 in the fourth section of Tanya, a Rebbe's life is not Chaim Psarim, is not life of flesh. Not after he passed away, during a soul in a body. His life is what? Ava and Yira and Amunah. Love and awe of God and faith. So what does that mean? It turns the whole thing over. It's not about Gimmel Tammuz. I saw, many people here saw the Rebbe Begashmis. We saw a physical human being. We see it on videos now. What are you seeing exactly? What makes the Rebbe the Rebbe? So for most of us, it's charismatic look, blue eyes, very handsome, and it's very compelling. Some people, they hear the Rebbe's Torah and the Rebbe's words, and some people they see connected to the Rebbe's directives. Now all this may be true, but what's the essence of a Rebbe? The essence of a Rebbe is, like the Rebbe says, is basically he's a transparent channel of what God wants in this world. Does that change with Gimmel Tammuz or not? How could that change? It's a transparent channel. It's a transparent channel. The only thing that changes is what we see and what we relate to. Now, I understand we want that, and we deserve it, and we want it in a goof that we can relate to. That's a given. So the Rebbe says in that sikh, in 1966 particularly, he says the following. So, what happens after Yud Shvat? It's up to us. It's Zareh B'chaim now. Till then, the Rebbe, so to speak, controls the body movements of his arms and legs, and his eyes and his ears and so on. But now it's completely, we are now those channels. We become the arms and legs. And the Rebbe says, so there was someone that continues and perpetuates the Rebbe's work in this world. The Rebbe is alive through him. Zareh B'chaim, Afru B'chaim. And there's no death. And someone who doesn't, They're relegating the Frierdiker Rebbe, the Rebbe said then, to Gan Eden. And yes, he doesn't continue on here. You know why? Because we're not there to be the vehicle. That's the gist of it. You can look it up. It's even more powerful than what I just said. So now I go back to Gimmel Tammuz now. Gimmel Tammuz. There are a few talks that Rebbe gave, and one again I take personally, and I'm sure everybody here can take personally. 6 weeks before the Rebbe had a stroke was Gimmel Shvat. So Gimmel Shvat Tovshin Nun Beis. 6 weeks later would be Chav Zayin Adar, that fateful Monday evening, when we heard the news of the oil, what happened, that the Rebbe had a stroke. So 6 weeks before, the Rebbe actually talked about a stroke. And I remember it, because I actually wrote it up. I had the merit of writing it up. The Rebbe edited it, and it was published at the time. And it was quite strange talk at the time. And unfortunately, 6 weeks later, it became tragically obvious why the Rebbe said it. And the Rebbe is speaking about a stroke. He's speaking about his father-in-law. It's printed today in Sefer HaSichos Tovshin and Beis. If you want to look it up in the volume, and there's Tovshin and Beis, that's Sicha Gimmel Shvat. And the Rebbe said that when my father-in-law had the stroke in I think it was 1943. Not sure what year exactly. I don't think it says the year there. It says the doctor asked my father-in-law, the Rebbe, Frierdiker Rebbe, and there it doesn't say this detail, but the Rebbe said it another time. The doctor said, Rebbe, I'm not a believer, but you are. Why would your God strike you, of all places, in the two things that connect you to your people? Your mouth and your right hand. Because that's what was struck. Both by the Frierdiker Rebbe and by the Rebbe, mind you. Why would God do that? It's like the cruelest thing to do. Literally, the two things the Rebbe communicates with his chassidim is his mouth. It says, Maimorim Sichos, directives, communication, and his hand. He wrote with his right hand. So the Rebbe said then that my Shver, the Frierdiker Rebbe did not answer. And the Rebbe proceeds, you can say, to give an answer. Briefly, what did the Rebbe say? The Rebbe said that Moshe Rabbeinu was also this way. When Moshe Rabbeinu was asked by God to lead the Jews out of Egypt, what did he tell them? One of the main excuses or reasons he didn't want to do it was, Lo yish dvarim anechi, I'm a man of no words. And then Aral Sfasayim, Kvad Peh, Kvad Loshen, 3 different ways Moshe describes himself as a person who has a speech difficulty, cannot speak. So it wasn't due to a stroke, but it was due to the medrash, famous medrash with the coals. We don't have to go there right now. So the Rebbe asked, why would God choose, of all people, to be a communicator? That was what he wanted Moshe to be. Communicate with Pare to redeem the Jews. Then communicate Torah to the Jews. Moshe Kibbel Torah Messina. What was Moshe's strength? Communication. What else did he have? So of all people, God chose was the only man that had a difficulty speaking. So the Rebbe cites from Chassidus that says that Moshe was from the world of Machshava, thought. Min Amayim Mishisui. As you know, Moshe's name was not Moshe. His Jewish parents didn't give him Moshe as his bris. There's a bunch of opinions in the Gemara what his name was. But it wasn't Moshe. Moshe is a name that the daughter of Pare gave him because she drew him out of water. So why would you? We all call him Moshe. Why would you do that? That's like almost an insult to his parents. Because Chassidus explains because she, unknowingly perhaps, sensed what his real essence was. His essence was that he was drawn from another place, from water, what Chassidus calls the hidden world, Alma Diskasi, the world of thought. A world that the unconscious, if you will, superconscious. And Hashem took a neshama from such a great place and put it into the world of dibur, of speech. That's why Moshe was a person higher than speech, not lower than speech. As an aside, there was the chassid Zalman Moshe Yitzchaki, when they heard that the Frierdiker Rebbe had a stroke. So he famously said, Zevi Grob de Welt is Amikenish Verstehen what the Rebbe sagt. Instead of saying the Rebbe had a stroke, he said, look how grob, look how coarse the world is that we can't understand what the Rebbe is saying. A very different way to look at things. So the Rebbe said Moshe was on that level. Then by Matan Torah he was healed, because ultimately the goal is obviously to bridge the world of thought with the world of speech. You can look up the talk, it's more elaborate than what I've just said. I just gave you the brief. But then there was an end of the Sikha, there's the directive. There's a Hirah. And the Rebbe says, when a Rebbe has a stroke, it's the job of the people who heard the Rebbe's words to become his mouthpiece. Like Aaron Achicha should be your mouthpiece that we become the mouthpiece of the Rebbe, to say the things the Rebbe would say. This is the Rebbe's conclusion in that talk. Now, to be very honest, I remember it very vividly because I remember the talk, I remember writing it, I remember it was published. And I remember Chav Zayin Oder came. The shock with Chav Zayin Oder was too great for many of us. I never got the message till around 2 years later, to be honest. The Rebbe had a second stroke 2 years after the first Chav Zayin Oder. That's when I had an epiphany, unfortunately. And the epiphany was that talk, what does the Rebbe mean? I personally was in that position. That's what I did. I was a chayzer. I repeated the Rebbe's words. So what am I doing with my life? I remember that's when I sat down to write toward a meaningful life. It was a direct outgrowth of that talk of Gimmel Shvat. That's what the Rebbe said, be my mouthpiece. Now, all of us have different talents. But if we are to dedicate ourselves and say, I am the Rebbe, tell me what to do. So the Rebbe said it clearly. He said it to us all. Be my mouthpiece. And now, no one can say that the Rebbe didn't leave us with words. There's thousands and thousands and thousands of pages. Thousands of hours of recordings. So there's no lack of words of the Rebbe. And maybe that's why they're there. So there's no excuse to say, I don't know what the Rebbe said. The challenge is not to be lazy or complacent. Sit down, figure out some of the Rebbe's directives, and see how you can share them with other people. But I don't mean this in the conventional way, because you could say, oh, listen, okay, back to the same old thing, we're back to square one, Chaz of the Rebbe's talks, have a share, and so on. That's nice. I'm talking about in a compelling fashion, in a real way that we take the Gimmel Tammuz to heart, and we turn it into something that it changes who you are. So that's one very specific Hira. It's clear. Now, we all wish, and I wish, that we didn't have to be this way, and would rather the Rebbe be the speaking, and we just repeating. But that's what he said. And then came the famous Sikha, also not far from Chav Zayin Oder, actually 11 months to the day before the Rebbe had a stroke. You tell me how uncanny this is. And the Rebbe, the Sikha, everybody knows. Chav Ches Nisan Tavshin Nun Aleph. Which is what? Chav Zayin Oder Tavshin Nun Beis. Chav Ches Nisan is 11 months. We all know the number 11 is associated with the Rebbe. Yud Aleph Nisan. 11 months before the Rebbe has a stroke, he says the following words. You explain this to me. I've done everything I can, and now do what you can. Now at the time, it created some uproar. People, what does it mean? But sadly, it became fulfilled in a very tragic way. Until then, you could say, okay, the Rebbe is saying that, but the Rebbe is still doing, and we're also doing. Then, Begashmis, however you interpret it, the Rebbe was robbed, or maybe agreed or didn't agree of his speech and his ability to speak to us and write. And then became fulfilled in a sad way, where the Rebbe said, I did everything, now it's up to you. Now it is up to us. And 2 years and some months, whatever mysterious, bizarre, cruel reason God chose to keep the Rebbe in such a golus, between the stroke and the Gimmel Tammuz, which again is from the mysteries I'm not going to even attempt to discuss, but the facts on the ground are that today, 22 years from then, from that Gimmel Tammuz, we are here. And we don't see the Rebbe Begashmis. To say the Rebbe is not here, Chaz v'Shalom. To say that his mission, that God sent him, just like the mission of the Rebbe's before him, in some way ceases, God forbid. But today we're faced with a new challenge, and the challenge is, what are we going to do? Today you can't just fly to Crown Heights and say, okay, I'm here, let's dance on Simchas Torah, hear the Rebbe blow Shofar, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, whatever, Mincha, Ma'ariv, or all the other things the Rebbe did, dollars. Today we create the reality of the Rebbe. And what the Rebbe said in 1966 rings much truer today even. Because then, in 1966, the Rebbe was leading, and he was clearly continuing. Today, each of us carry that responsibility. You do something, and the Rebbe lives. You don't do something, God forbid, I don't want to conclude that sentence. So it's completely dependent on us. Now the thing we have to remember, and this is the main punchline, is that even if we do today with our own efforts, we should never forget it's really the Rebbe working through us. And I want to dedicate a few more words to that before, 10 o'clock is Ma'ariv? On the dot? Okay. See, I'm punctual. But I just want to make sure that I want to qualify what I just said. But today there is no choice, but you and I must do something. Now, I always say this to myself. It's one of the ways I motivate myself, to be honest, because it's very easy to be complacent. Very easy. There's so many options today, so many distractions, and even good things, But here's what I remember once by Farbrengen, the Rebbe saying the following. Maybe more than once. He said, when I speak by Farbrengen, people think I'm speaking to many people, because there are a lot of people here, and there are many people listening on the shidur, whatever, the broadcast. The Rebbe says it's not correct. I'm speaking here, it's like a yechidus, a private audience that I'm having with each one of you, as if no one else is there. And the Rebbe actually brought a medrash to confirm that. The Rebbe says that the medrash asked the question, why is it that by the Ten Commandments, and in many places in the Torah, especially Ten Commandments, everything is written Lashon Yachid. Lashon Yachid means in the first person. In Hebrew, when you talk to a few people, you say Lachem or Lachem. In English, you say to a group and to an individual. But in Hebrew, there's a difference between plural and singular. So here, millions of people are standing around Mount Sinai, and it says, Anochi Hashem Elokecha. It should say, Anochi Hashem Elokecha. Kavod es avicha es avichem. Lo ysignevu, not lo ysignev. Everything in the plural. Why does it say it in the singular? And the Medrash answers, because every Jew standing there, man and woman and child, heard it as if no one else was there. It was like you and Hashem, and that was that. It was not a group event. Yeah, there was a lot of people there. There were a lot of people there, but it was each one hearing it as if no one else was there. As an aside, I remember Rabbi Jonathan Sachs tells the story when he became a pulpit rabbi. Of course, he acknowledged that the Rebbe was the one that influenced him to become a rabbi. He was a philosopher, a major in philosophy, and the Rebbe told him to suggest he become a rabbi, because then it will help other people. So in his first pulpit, where he had a small shul in London, he said he got up Friday night and gave his first sermon. And he said, he acknowledged the Rebbe, without him I wouldn't be here. So he said, a woman after my talk came over to me and asked me, what's the difference between a Rebbe and a rabbi? She never heard about the Rebbe. She sees a rabbi. So he said, you saw it here tonight. When a rabbi speaks, he could be speaking to 500 people and everybody thinks he's speaking to somebody else. And when a Rebbe speaks, he could be speaking to 5,000 people and everyone thinks he's speaking to me. That's the difference. So the Rebbe said this, which means the following: that when you read a sikha from the Rebbe, or you listen to something the Rebbe said, or you see a video, there's no one else the Rebbe said it to but you. Imagine the Rebbe calling you in privately on the 28th of Nisan 1991 and saying to you, I finished everything I can do, I did everything I can do, now I'm giving it to you to do. And he only said it to you, there's no one else. You come out of Yechidus, what would you do? I doubt that anybody would say, I'm going to sleep, and it doesn't mean me. Maybe a few days or a few weeks pass, you may start saying, I don't know what to do. But I'll add a little twist to it. Let's say the Rebbe said to you, and to me, in private audience, that if you invest a few $1,000s in this business, I assure you, you'll make billions, not millions, billions. Tell me, is there anyone that you know would not leave a stone unturned? You'd go to lawyers, you'd go to business investors, you'd go to experts, and you say, I know this is going to work. Tell me how. Why? Because billions of dollars is a very tangible reward. Mashiach, sadly, is just simply not. We don't see Mashiach in those terms. It's a spiritual concept for many of us, if at all. It's abstract. And it's not as, let's put it this way, as exciting as a few $1 billion. Okay. I know this on a small scale because last year we initiated a contest called My Life Chassidus Applied Essay Contest, and hundreds and hundreds of people wrote essays, which is hard to do. And I wonder sometimes, was it because they wanted to express Chassidus or because of the $10,000 award that was awarded? So I guess it was Chassidus with an additional $10,000 incentive. Because in this world, let's be honest, money talks. The Wall Street Journal adds, and we translate. But money talks. So money is tangible. We're Gashmistika people, let's be honest. The Rebbe is Aish Eliki. But he did say it to us. So you could ask a question, why is he speaking to Gashmistika, grubba people like us who don't relate to these type of concepts? Why are you telling us to do something that's not in our realm? But he said it. What can you do? He said it, and he said it to each one of us like in Yechidus. I don't see how we're going to make a move unless you think the Rebbe spoke to you personally, and not say someone else is going to do it, someone that's better than me, smarter than me, has more time than me. If we don't think in those terms, I don't see how this can be urgent. Because you could always say there's other people. So I think number one is the mindset has to be that the Rebbe is speaking to each one of us. Number two, 22 years or one day doesn't make a difference. The words still ring true, and we still don't have the Gula, and we have plenty of challenges. So nothing is really like saying, oh, it's all done, we have nothing else to do. We can't leave a stone unturned. Now you could say, so what's your plan? What are we going to do? Scream Yachi? What should we do? Okay, fine, that's a legitimate question. So maybe, as the Rebbe said at the end of that Farasich Chav Chesnis, what did he say? He said two things. He said maybe there'll be 10 of you that will be stubborn enough and insist and say it with an emes. But then he said something even more powerful at the end. He said maybe God should help, that there should be one or two or three of you that will come together and strategize what to do and how to do. I don't see an excuse that any of us have not to be one of those 1, 2, 3. Now it's interesting, the Rebbe rarely, if at all, ever limited. He always said everything he said was for everybody. Why suddenly 1, 2, 3? The only way I can explain it is because he realized that having more than that is going to be probably impossible to expect. But 1, 2, 3 people to come together and figure out how you can make billions of dollars with the directive of the Rebbe that you heard privately in Yechidus, the Rebbe expected that. Now, we could say that once we try that and we've done everything we can, what else can we do? But there's no excuse for us not to take that attitude. So right there, I've given a few suggestions, not my own, taken from the Rebbe's talks. I haven't added anything to the talks themselves. All I did was added a sense of urgency to it. That it's speaking to you, that it's nitzchi, and if you take the Rebbe seriously, he said it to you. Would you be comfortable? I wouldn't be. That if the Rebbe came and said, give me a duch, give me a report of what you guys did in the last 22 years. The Rebbe said the words lehevel larik. Everything I did was lehevel larik, which everybody shocked. How could the Rebbe say lehevel larik? Look how much he accomplished. Look in Toronto, look in New York, look in the cities all across the world. But the same Rebbe Shechina Medaberes Metegrene said those words too. And he did not say it because, God forbid, he was depressed or he was desperate, as some people suggest. He's talking about the same Elokus. So, firstly, it shouldn't shock anyone. The Rebbe is a Torah Jew. There's a Medrash that says exactly the same thing. The Medrash in Kehelis Rabbah says, Kol Teireh Ba'elam Hazeh Hevel Hu L'gabe Teirosha Shel Mashiach. The word Larik doesn't say that, but Hevel Hu. The whole Torah, Har Sinai, Moshe Rabbeinu, Yeshua, all the Tanoim, Amoraim, Rashbi, every Torah, the Baal Shem Tov, all the Rabbein, it's all Hevel compared to Teirosha Shel Mashiach. How could the Medrash say such a thing? The Rebbe just really echoed that. The answer is because if you knew what Mashiach really was, you'd realize it's not because all this Torah is not great, but compared to what Mashiach is, it's nullified. It's not an unheard of concept. So it's not, God forbid, trying to knock what Torah is. So the Rebbe said that because the Rebbe is the only Rebbe, just like he's the only Rebbe that went to war against complacency, he's also the only Rebbe that stated clearly his destination, his prize is the end, the goal line. His marathon does not end after 22 miles. If it's a 23-mile marathon, all the way. And if you don't go that last inch, you haven't accomplished it. Why the Rebbe put everything on the line, that we can Farbrengen about, but he did. And therefore, once he said that's what he wants, everything compared to that is not it. That doesn't take away what we've accomplished. It just means he's set the bar so high, and unless you have that, you don't have the whole thing. So now it's up to us. That's very clear. So we really have, I would say, three options right now. We could all go back to our reverie and our complacency, which I don't want to predict that may happen, but a distant possibility. That's one option. Number two, we could say that everything I said here is Baba Mises and just meaningless. Oh, it actually is part of number one. That makes it, justifies it all. Number two is that we could actually change things and say, you know what? Maybe it's time to get my act together and figure out how I can be that shliach of the Rebbe and take the Rebbe's words personally and seriously and really change something seriously. Or we can go to the third option, is saying that the things we're doing for Mashiach, which I'm sure everybody's doing here in some way or another, I think there's shiurim, people talk about it, and just continue maybe with a little more passion. So that's the three real options. Is there any other option? That's all I can come up with. Obviously, my point here is I don't see a real option except number two. And everything is result-based. Result-based means either we achieve the goal or we don't achieve it. Now, it's not up to us to bring Mashiach, so to speak. That the Eibishter is going to decide. But it's up to us to fulfill what the Rebbe directed us to do. And I don't know how many more words I can say to explain it further. I think I said some things. I'm sure there's much more to say. But I think the gist of it, I want to just sum it up in as follows. That we have number one is have to take it seriously and personally. If it's not you, if you don't feel it's me, and you're looking at someone near you, your rabbi, your mashpia, your teacher, the rest of the community, you're already taking yourself out of the picture. Then you're not the soldier. God forbid, I wish no one says that, but that without that type of sense of personalization that it's me, that's number one, step number one. Number two is that there are directives from the Rebbe. This is not some ambiguous or vague thing. The Rebbe I spoke the Gimmel Tammuz very clearly about speaking his words. And there are many ways to do it. I am an author, I'm a speaker, so I do it that way. There are other ways to do it. Some people can do it through their sphere of influence at work. Some people can do it through emails and technology. There's hundreds of ways to communicate. Communication is our time. We're in a communication revolution, they call it, no? That's number two. And number three is, of course, the main directive that the Rebbe said after Chavches Nissen, when everybody submitted all kinds of interesting and bizarre ideas. The Rebbe said then, Sazrim et Seder, Derech Yeshara. You don't need any new strange ways. There's a straight way to do this. And lately the video went around about the woman who went over to the Rebbe Sunday, dollars after Chavches Nissen was what day in the week? Was it Thursday? I don't remember. Thursday? So that Sunday a woman went by dollars. And clearly it was a very emotional, she had lost a child, you could see from what she says. And she starts telling the Rebbe, you're dropping the ball on us, we can't do it, you're the one that has to do it. You could all check out this video, it's pretty powerful. And the Rebbe says to her, if all of you, all the Klal Yisrael can do it, how do you expect one individual to do it? Me. So then she says, you're not one individual, you're the Rebbe. So the Rebbe says, if I'm the Rebbe, I'm telling you what you have to do, basically. And then she continues, I want my son back, my child back. Rebbe, you can't do this to us. And the Rebbe does not, and I'm sure it broke the Rebbe's heart, there's no doubt, but he does not waver. He keeps saying, I'm telling you what you have to do. So even with that emotional outcry of a woman, and it was clearly sincere, it wasn't set up, she was talking from her heart. And she was saying everything true. You're the Rebbe. Clearly the Rebbe made it very clear, and it's maybe a mystery, that something has to be done by us. And until we do that, until we have the result, as a result of it, we cannot just say, I did everything possible. It's not correct. I cannot say that. I think I did a few things, but I don't think I can say. And I don't think I know I can't say, because there's 7 billion people on this earth. And I don't want to be any rude awakening here, but most of them don't even know what the Rebbe means, what Chassidus means, what Mashiach means. And that means most, I don't just mean most, I mean 99.99999%. So how could you say that? If I'm embarrassed actually when I see that Facebook has 1.8 billion users and the average 50 minutes of use a day, and I see Coca-Cola is the number one brand, and I know everyone says Coca-Cola and Chabad are everywhere. That's nice, but Coca-Cola is making more money than Chabad is, and a few more people drinking it. And then I see Facebook and Google and so on. I actually am jealous. I'm jealous because I see a bunch of shmeklach, young Jews, most of them, and look what they're doing. So I know everyone answers, that's easy because it's gashmius. It's shtusim, nonsense. It's easy to sell nonsense. Well, let me tell you something. The Torah was given at Har Sinai over 3,300 years ago. Just a few million Jews. And today, 4 billion people on this planet happen to see the Bible as their number one book, as the biggest bestseller. 2.5 billion Christians and 1.8 billion Muslims. Forget about our opinion of them. But the bottom line is, to say that Avram Avinu was Echad Haya Avram, yeah, but he is now perhaps one of the most, maybe the first and the pioneer of monotheism. So to say we can't change the world, it's absolutely not true. Jews did change the world. So when I see that, and the Rebbe said change the world, and there's that number of people, and we haven't reached the numbers, I cannot say, oh, we really did everything. We really did? I would love someone to tell me how that's true. I know it's easy to come together in asifas and meetings and kinusim and so on and say, hey, Lubavitch has changed the world. It's very nice on one end. I agree that we've done major things. But if you look from the world's perspective, I don't think we're up on the number 10. If the secular world had to make a list of the top 10 Jews of the last century, you tell me if any of the Rabbeim would be on it. You'd have Bob Dylan on it, and Albert Einstein, and Sigmund Freud. I don't think you'd have the Rebbe on it. What does that tell you? Not that the Rebbe is not greater than them, and we haven't done the job of convincing Tachteinim, from the perspective of Tachteinim, that what we think is the single most important thing is the single most important thing. I'll just conclude with one more note. There's a man called, his name is John Meacham. He used to be the editor-in-chief of Newsweek magazine. Now this is a very major, big magazine. I happen to know him because he was a religion editor and he had interviewed me once. So I maintained a relationship with him. And he said something to me which I've shared to many shluchim, which is a real wake-up call. Every year, Newsweek and Time magazine, they have these like 6 or 7 issues a year that cover religious topics. Spirituality today, the birth of Adam and Eve, Garden of Eden, good and evil. Spiritual, theological topics. They had one week, they had a cover story called Spirituality in America, and they covered it. They had the Christians, and the Muslims, they had the Buddhists, and they had the Jews. And who represented the Jews in Spirituality in America was a man called Zalman Schachter, who I happen to also know. Okay? Anyway, I wrote an email to Meacham, because Meacham is not Jewish, but he's very, very friendly, and he's learned Chassidus. He learned with Abraham Joshua Heschel, and he's a knowledgeable guy. He knows Chabad Chassidus, and he doesn't have let's put it this way, the atheism of non-Jews. He's a believer. So I write to him that between you and me, we both know that the spirituality in America for Jews is Chassidus today. So why didn't you, Chabad Chassidus namely, why didn't you have at least one word about that? And he writes to me back in 5 lines the following. He says, I'm the editor-in-chief of a major American magazine. You and I may know this, but you did not do your job, and your colleagues did not do their job, because I cannot be your PR man to make Chabad Chassidus known. When you'll make it known, I'll cover it. He says, Chabad is known, this is the words he wrote, as a social revolution. Any Chabad house is a place you will be accepted non-judgmentally, with love, kosher food. Chabad is a social thing. Nobody sees it as a philosophical or theological movement. These are her words to me. And he didn't mean in any way malicious. He said, so you have your work cut out for you. Now, I'm saying this not in a negative way. I take this as a motivational thing. This is Tachteinim speaking. You could say he's wrong. If you were editor-in-chief, you'd ought to have the whole magazine would be Chabad. That's fine, but you're not the editor-in-chief, and neither am I. Algemeiner will cover a little Chabad Chassidus, but Newsweek is Newsweek. So that to me is Evan HaBeichem. This is a real litmus test. So no one's going to tell me, and I'm in this world of communication and writing and publishing, that we succeeded when a man like that writes that. To me, I took it motivation. I did not take it negatively. I didn't write back to him, what are you talking about? Which, come to 770 and I'll show you, that type of thing. We'll get you drunk and we'll convince you that you're wrong. I took it very seriously. And I took it as a sign that when the Rebbe said, Chavches Nissen is very practical. Yes, I cannot do that for you. The Rebbe is not going to go to Newsweek magazine. The Rebbe is a Rebbe. That's a job we have to do. So that's just one example in my world where I could say, there's a little more work to be done. But again, I don't want them to come away from anyone coming away from here thinking that I'm trying to say that whatever's been done is meaningless. The Rebbe said Lehevel Larik, that's the Rebbe saying that. I'm not trying to say, I think we've done tremendous things, but the Rebbe set a standard that's even higher. What can we do? I find that as a blessing, not as a difficulty. That's what the Rebbe wants. And more importantly, saying you can do something in this regard. So this is what we need to look at. Gimmel Tammuz, in that sense, is maybe a big helam, and it is one. But every helam in Chassidus is a helam b'shvil hagilui. That's the language of Chassidus. There's no such thing as a tzimtzum, a concealment just as an end in itself. It's always a springboard for greater growth. This is a steadfast position of the Rebbe across the board. So may Hashem help us all that we should use this void, as the Rebbe said then in Toshalam al-Ches to the doctor, that is the vacuum in the needle that draws the energy, not the needle itself. May we use this vacuum to be able to motivate us to wake up from our complacency and get our act together. 2-3 of us, doesn't need millions, and maybe do something qualitatively and quantitatively different, some shift that will make a real difference. And we should be zeich in the Rebbe's words, as he said at the end of Basilagani Tovshin Yud, that wir sollen nisken, wir sollen sein zusammen in Rebbe dolle matem asaret tvachim v'hu yigalein l'chaim.
We'll take a short break from Ma'ariv. I shouldn't say short. We'll take as long as it
L'chaim. We resume.
Wait aside. Whoever would like
Okay, to go a bit further and deeper into Nyanim here, when you're challenged to have to present something in a very relevant way, you often you have to dig deeper. You have to dig deeper into Chassidus, into the Rebbe's words, to come up with good answers. So I've been challenged very many times with the following question, and that question is, how would the world be different if the Rebbe didn't exist? I actually phrase that question because it's one thing, Lubavitchers talk to each other, and we all take for granted the Rebbe is the Nasi Ador, and the Rebbe is a continuation of the Frierdiker Rebbe, and the Rebbe Rashab, Rebbe Marash, Mercedes, Mittler Rebbe, Alter Rebbe, Magid, Baal Shem Tov, all the way back to Moshe Rabbeinu and to Atzmus Ein Sof itself. So this is something that we take for granted. But when you have to present this to someone who never heard the word Rebbe, or never heard Chassidus, what do you say? So many of us think, you just can't get that through to someone unless they go into yeshiva and they start learning all the basic Yesodis. It's not correct. You absolutely can. And I want to share a few ways of doing that. And there's many approaches to this, and I'm not suggesting what I'm going to say now is the only way, but it's one way, and I have tested it. And so Chassidus says that when you want to pick up a building, you have to pick it up from the bottom. And then you pick up the whole building. If you pick it up from the middle, you won't get the whole building. I find this to be very true, especially in communicating Chassidus, Torah in general, that if you're able to articulate it to someone that has no background and doesn't know the language at all, first of all, it shows you understand it better, and second of all, it picks up all the building, even the people on the highest levels. One of the things that Rebbe was is so brilliant at, if you could put it that way, is the ability to take the deepest concepts and explain it even to a child. Someone who worked in the sikhs for many years, I can tell you that the sikhs to the children, and even more so the sikhs to the women, which many thought was more so-called simple, actually are deeper in Yonim Chassidus than very often long Farbrengens that were given, the big long Farbrengens in Yom Tov and Shabbos and so on. Because the Rebbe was putting into Aishis, into words that were not necessarily the original. So I'm talking to Bochrim and giving a shir in Chassidus, for example, I always challenge myself and challenge anyone and say, can you explain to me Mamala Kalam and Sevav Kalam and Atzmus, or Atzilas, Bri, Yitzid Asi, or the 10 spheres, or Erein Sof Lifnei Tzimtzum, in simple English? How many people can do that? Without using any Hebrew words. And if you can't do it, then frankly, you probably don't really understand it. That doesn't mean you don't get it, because obviously you get something, but it means you haven't really internalized it, because you can't speak to someone that doesn't speak that language. And this is a klal, by the way, in Chachma in general.
In general, wisdom, the best teachers and the deepest understanding people are the ones that can have translated, like Shlomo Melech, the 3,000 Mishalim metaphors. So, in that context, let me say a few words about the so-called Rebbe. So, I propose that it's always good, a challenging way to say it. Okay, tell me, how would the world be different if the Rebbe didn't exist? Nobody has a problem if someone says, without Einstein, we wouldn't have the atom, the ability to split the atom. We wouldn't have nuclear energy. We wouldn't have probably computers. There's a whole list of things that you can list that literally change the world. And the same thing about a lot of other chachamim. So someone will ask you the question, tell me, but you, the Rebbe, is bigger than them all. So tell me how he revolutionized the world better than Einstein did. Now, for some people that's a heretical question. How could you even compare the two? Yeah, but still answer the question. And I've been forced to have to answer this, so let me share with you some of the answers I gave. And I put it in the context of the fact that the world does not appreciate it yet. That's because we didn't do the job well. But there are a lot of great, great people who've changed the world, and it took generations for people to appreciate it. So we have a classic story with that. Some say the Beis Yosef, some say the Magid. I mean, the story is associated with a lot of people. That is one saying, teaching a Torah in a Beis Medrash, and he said a Chiddush Nifla, a tremendous, innovative idea in Gemara. And everybody, all the students who were scholars in their own right, said, wow, unbelievable. They never heard anything like this. Then one of them traveling back home goes into a simple shul, and sees a few simple people studying Gemara, this Gemara, and one of them says the same Chiddush. So he went back to the Magid or whoever the story is with and said, you said something so powerful. How is a simple Jew giving a shir in a shul come up with the same idea you came up with? And he answered, because once it's nimshach in Ba'avir Eilam, once someone breaks through Posach, Sadera, Tzinir, someone opens up the channel for the idea, it makes it easier that everyone else can come up with the same idea. And this is known, even outside of Torah, that once an idea enters the so-called the atmosphere, it becomes easier. That's why it's accumulative. You see, innovation. When innovations happen in one part of the world, it helps other places also come up with innovation. So the fact that people may not know the Rebbe's tremendous contributions doesn't mean it's not there, but you still have to articulate what are they. So one of the ways I've presented, and I'll share with you, is broken into 5 main chidushim, 5 main, let's say, revolutionary contributions. And let me preface again, this doesn't mean, when I say a contribution, doesn't mean no one ever said this idea before, but the focus and making this a central point and an emphasis in our time, that's the chiddush. Like they say, this professor who wrote his lifetime thesis and presents it to the Wizard of Geniuses, and they come back after deliberating and they say, we all unanimously agree that what you wrote was both good and original. So he was very taken because this is lifetime work. It's like a magnum opus. And but then the guy continues, there's only one problem. The part that's good is not original, and the part that's original is not good. So it was good and original. By what we know in Torah, and the Rabbi may say, Chidush, the Alter Rebbe was a Neshama Chadash, he was Mechadish. But he writes in the big introduction to Tanya, the Shabbat, that's me Pisvarim and Pisefrim. And Kemuvan, it's with humility that he writes that and all that, but the bottom line still writes it, because there's no such thing as just someone coming and saying something so new as the Rebbe Rashab writes cynically, sarcastically in Kuntas Eitzachayim, that there's such chidushim they weren't even given by Har Sinai. That's not a contribution, that's just shtus. So the Rebbe's chidushim as well are, of course, in the context of Chassidus in general, Torah, Chassidus in particular, and Torah in general. So the 5 things, break it down into 5 points, would be concept of, and I'll just say it in one word and then I'll elaborate. Mission, what we call shlichus. The second thing is persistence. The third thing is aveda b'koyach atzmei, self-initiative. The 4th thing is unity, and the 5th is destination, what we call Mashiach. So I want to just say this before I go into the details. I was once giving a class many years ago in New York City, and it was a group of people from the arts and entertainment industry. These were Jews, mostly Jews, but they were not. They were very spiritual, but not from traditional background. So they would say their spirituality came from Zen Buddhism, a thing called LSD, and stuff like that. Yeah. Does anybody know what that is? Yeah. Yes, not an acronym for Let's Start Davening. That's correct. So I realized, and this is a skill I learned actually in the Rebbe in some ways, that there's a thing called stereotyping. We all stereotype. What's stereotyping? That even before I open my mouth, the mere fact I have a beard and a yarmulke is not a neutral projection. So people can read in. I may remind one person of an angry grandfather that schlepped him to synagogue on Yom Kippur against his will, or irrelevant Hebrew school teacher, or maybe even fond memories. So I realized I was at a disadvantage because even before I opened my mouth, it wasn't neutral. So I tried an experiment. The experiment I mentioned before, the idea of completely speaking simple English. And I decided I won't use any words that are from Torah or religious in any way. So instead of God, I use the word the essence. But actually, atzmus mohus, the essence, or reality. Or if it was a particularly New Age group, I used words like non-defined layers of unconscious energy or something like that. Instead of mitzvahs, instead of Torah, I used the word blueprint. Instead of mitzvahs, connections, tzavs v'chibur. Instead of Mashiach, I used the word destination. The destination. And here I was waxing eloquent about how we connect to the reality, the essence of everything, through following this blueprint and making the connections and creating a total fusion between the inner and the outer, and the unconscious and the conscious, and form and function, and body and soul, to a total fusion that will be seamless, unified, as we reach the ultimate destination. This was the way I was speaking. And I went on and on. It was the machai, it was beautiful. And the people were really listening. They were like so engaged and mesmerized. After a few weeks, a guy came over to me and said to me, are you talking about God? And I said, yes, but don't spoil it for the others. And this worked. Why? Because there was no words that were loaded. There were no words that anybody could hang on to and interpret different ways. I spoke complete simple English. And you'll find when you start speaking about anything in Chassidus, and the Rebbe included, in this type of language, besides that it's refreshing even to ourselves, it also, you get much deeper into the Nekudas than things we take for granted. I say to you, Rebbe, we already take for granted. Oh, the Rebbe, we know the Rebbe, that's that. But we have to force to translate, like I said, these type of contributions. That's why I said mission, persistence, self-initiative, unity, and destination. You don't see one word in Hebrew there, but they're all taken from Hebrew. So let's talk about mission. Let's start with mission. So I have a very powerful story that actually happened. I don't know if now is the time to go into the details. Some of you may be aware, may be familiar. But in Torah Meaningful Life, I was forced to obviously write in this type of language. So in the chapter on birth, I remember, I was trying to capture in one line, what did the Rebbe say about birth, a birthday? So we all know Tovshim and Ches, in honor of the Rebbetzon's birthday, Chav Hei Adar, right after Chav Pei Shvat rather, the Rebbe initiated then Gimmel Tammuz. Now the concept of the Gimmel Tammuz was there before. The Rebbe spoke about it and taught people in Gimmel Tammuz different customs and so on. But as a real so-called campaign, big campaign, connecting it. And when you look in those talks, you sometimes like, what is a Gimmel Tammuz? What is a birthday? Now everybody celebrates birthdays in this world. There are birthday cakes and birthday gifts and birthday parties. But how does the Rebbe capture what a birthday is? And also we know that birthdays was not something that was necessarily always celebrated, even by Chazal. The Rebbe writes about it a lot. I mean, they have it in Muslim and Zayar and in other places, and obviously there's always something. But the Rebbe made it into a major thing. And you wonder why? Why birthday suddenly? So in many sikhs, if you strip it from all the details and get to the etzem, the nekuda, the Rebbe said by birth, a line you hear very often, especially in big Farbrengen, the Rebbe saying, Every person on this earth, when they were born, was sent by the Eibishter here to fulfill a unique and indispensable mission that you and only you can accomplish. A number of times I remember hearing by Farbrengen the Rebbe saying that no person on earth can replace the work you have to do. Not only in our generation, but even Moshe Rabbeinu. And all the Rabbeim, whoever lived and ever will live, cannot replace you, because if they could, why did they wish to put you here on earth? And in a nutshell, that's the essence, that the sense of mission that each of us is born and we're indispensable and we're necessary is the heart and soul of the concept of shlichus and mission. And you'll see in a moment the importance of it in our time. We'll get to that in a minute. So that's the idea, that we are each a shliach of the Eibishter's. You can add a shliach of the Rebbe's as well as the shliach of the Eibishter's. The Rebbe's a shliach. Shlachno b'yad tishlach. And to what? To fulfill something only you and only you can accomplish. Each one of us has that. Remember, of the things that Rebbe was always, sometimes would say yell about, would be very passionate about, of course, was me, Yehudi, Shleimus Haaretz. But there was one more thing that there would very few times, very, very, almost like the same passion, and said that if a person doesn't fulfill what they were sent to this earth to do, it's meval b'gan seder shtalshus. It confuses, it disturbs the entire cosmic order, because the Eibishter made a plan. It's like sending a bunch of people in a job. You do this, you do this, you do that. And one person's not doing it, the whole thing is upset, because it was a puzzle that's dependent on everybody doing their part. A number of times I heard the Rebbe say, like very, very passionate, and that's why you see in so many talks the Rebbe delivers, especially in the big Farbrengens, when writers, authors, musicians would come, the Rebbe would always dedicate a talk to them. That if you're a writer, you have to use your writing skills. Everybody has to use their skills, because those skills were given by God and given to use it to the fullest. You probably all know the story with Natan Yalin Mur. I told it, they played on a Living Torah gem the Tishrei time. You're familiar with the story with the writer from Israel? My father, I'll tell the story because it captures this mamish. It's a little tangent, but it's a geshmak emaisa. So in Tovshin Lamed Vov Rosh Hashanah would be 1975. So there's a man, Natan Yalin Mur. He was a writer. That's his Hebrew name, but his name was a different name. I don't remember what it was. And he was from Lechi gang, the Stern gang, rather. Lechi, yeah. Before Israel became a state, so there was that. There was the three groups: Haganah. There was the Begin's group, was the Irgun, right? And there was the Lechi, the real radicals. He was one of those radicals. But then, when the state became a state, he became antished. He became very disappointed. And he became anti-Israel, anti-Zionist, and pro-Palestinian or pro-Arab, whatever you want to call it. And he was right. He was a Talmud Chacham, actually, learned in yeshiva when he was young. But he was a non-believer in his own words. We don't obviously acknowledge that, but that's what he called himself. Anyway, my father, the Allgemeine started. So, the name Allgemeine actually the Rebbe gave. If you think about it, it's a pretty strange name, because Allgemeine means general. In German, Yiddish, it means Allgemeine, everything. My father asked the Rebbe, why that name? So the Rebbe said, because that's what a newspaper is supposed to be. Everything's supposed to be in it from all sides. So my father asked the Rebbe, everything. The Rebbe said, obviously things that you may find offensive, maybe not. But what's a newspaper? It's propaganda if you only have one approach. You have to have different approaches. So this was my father's approach as well. And so he knew Natan Yalin Mur, so he invited him to write an Allgemeine, because he wrote fluent Yiddish. Now, his articles were brilliant articles. From time to time, he would have these anti-Semitic articles, so to speak. But a lot of readers were very upset. My father, how could you print anti-Israel and pro-Arab, blah, blah. My father had this position as an editor-in-chief, you leave everything. You don't like it, write a letter and attack him, I'll print that too, The Natan Yalin Mur was, as I said, completely not interested in Yiddishkeit. But since he worked with my father, he was here Rosh Hashanah that year. So my father said to him, why don't you come with me for Kosher Bracha after Rosh Hashanah Farbrengen? The Rebbe gives out Kosher Bracha, and you'll come with me. And they went. He agreed. They come by the Rebbe. And I always told the story, and I'll tell you the whole how it evolved. So they went by, and the Rebbe, my father said who this is, Nathaniel and Mur. So the Rebbe said, I read in Yiddish, I read all your articles. So he was taken aback a bit, and the Rebbe said that God blessed you with a talent for writing, so you have to keep writing and using your talent. And she said to the Rebbe agrees with everything I write. He knew the Rebbe didn't. So the Rebbe said, not everything you read you have to agree with. You continue writing, and sof kol sof, ultimately you'll come to the truth. Anyway, he was like warmed up a bit. So then the Rebbe says to him, I know that you're not afraid of people. My question is if you're afraid of God. That's what the Rebbe asked. He says, but for whether you have fear, are you afraid of God? So when he told us the story, it was after the Kosher Bracha. We came back home to my parents' home. So he said that he didn't want to lie and say, I'm a Grace Yerushalayim. He also didn't want to say the truth that he doesn't believe, because he didn't want to be respectful. So he said, I eat tracht, a Jew thinks. A Jew thinks? Okay. So the Rebbe right away said to him, a Jew thinks, as you know yourself, thinking is abstract. It has to be concrete, action. All this in Yiddish. So then he says to the Rebbe, well, at least I'm like the Jew in the story with Levi Yitzchak bar Ditchever. That's what he says. I have to tell you the story before I tell you the continuation. The story with Levi Yitzchak bar Ditchever. And what he was referring to, and the Rebbe immediately picked up on it, was that Levi Yitzchak bar Ditchever once saw a Jew smoking on Shabbos, and he said to the Jew, you probably don't know it's Shabbos today. He said, I know it's Shabbos. So then you probably don't know that you're not supposed to smoke on Shabbos. He said, I know you're not supposed to smoke, I know it's Shabbos, and I'm lahachis, I'm very deliberately smoking on Shabbos because I don't believe. So the Levi Yitzchak bar Ditchever, who always found the silver lining and the positive, turned to the Eibishter, to Hashem in heaven, and says, look how beautiful a Jew is. A Jew doesn't want to tell a lie. That he's being truthful. So he's alluding, Nathaniel Lemur was alluding to this story, that at least I'm telling you I'm not lying, meaning that at least I'm being honest, that I'm not. So the Rebbe, without missing a beat, didn't have to hear the story, knew exactly what he was saying. He says the difference is, Levi Yitzchak bar Ditchever was talking about another Jew, and you're talking about yourself. So he was like, he was taken by that. And the Rebbe picked up and gave him, that was it. He comes home to my parents' home and he tells us the story. It's a beautiful story. I always shared it. Over the years, since then, 76, I've told it many, many times. Okay. Then, of course, the creation of GEM and other institutions that grew in the last few decades. So GEM came to me, with a measure of skepticism whether this story is true. I guess I think they were basically suggesting that since my brother doesn't tell always true stories, maybe I don't either. That's what they said. Which was an insult on both our levels, So I said to them, yes, I know the story, I heard it firsthand. But they were, it's a good story, maybe too good to be true. Even true, frankly, it's not like a miraculous story, like one of these, stories that are really unbelievable. But I knew the story, it wasn't a question. And so they said, so that, now they were looking for evidence. They say, I forgot the end of the story. This was 1976. In 1980, 4 years later, Nathaniel Lemur contracted Yenemach. And he was terminal illness, and the doctors didn't give him long to live. So he wrote to my father 2 letters from Israel and sent 2 articles to be published posthumously after he passes away. And which my father did. And those articles, he writes the story. And he says the following. He says that now my soul is standing before the divine Bezdin Shalmaila, the divine tribunal, and I'm being judged for my life, and I know that I didn't live a life like a Jew should have lived, and I don't know if they're going to give me equal time to defend myself. So I'm writing an article, and I want it to be published after I'm not here, meaning because everything below is read above. So while they're judging me, this article will be read, and I want to write about the merit that the Rebbe told me I should continue writing, and I'll ultimately come to the truth, and he writes the whole story. Which is, of course, a very powerful ending. So they asked me, Jem asked me if I have the articles. So I told them, go through the archive. They started looking and looking and looking. Now, there were a few things that were evident. First of all, there was a picture from Rosh Hashanah, Tafshin Lamed Vov, of Nathaniel and Mur and the Rebbe, and my father. Number two, suddenly Jem calls me one afternoon, and they say, you won't believe this, we found a video. Levi Yitzchak Farbrengen made a video, and the Rebbe speaking with Nathaniel and Mur, and not for 5 seconds, for 3 minutes, 4 minutes. And they can't make out all the words, because Farbrengen didn't stop the video at some point. He didn't capture it all. But they hear Levi Yitzchak Barditchev and a few other words. So I said, so good, you got it, there you go, publish. But they couldn't make out the words. They still want the articles. So they looked and looked. In 1980, they found, and my father writes, he's going to print the articles next week, but they can't find the article. Then finally, in 1981, a year later, for whatever reason, my father waited until his first yard site. That's when he published them. I don't know why. So they published the articles, then they came to interview me, and so I was a hero for a day that the story I told actually did happen. As a matter of fact, there were even more details. When I read the articles, there was even more detail I'll share with you. He came back Sukkot to Simchas Torah as well that year. And he went by again, Kesha Bracha, and the Rebbe told him, what was it, Sukkot himself? I don't know. Sukkot, I think, came back by the Rebbe, and the Rebbe told him, I hope you're not going to make me for a chayter, for a sinner. So he says, how can I make the Rebbe for a sinner? So the Rebbe said, someone who speaks dvarim b'teilim, words that don't come on to action, is called a chayter, it's called a sinner. And if you don't continue writing, as I suggested you should, then you're going to end up making what I said to you as dvarim b'teilim. That's what the Rebbe told him. So he promised the Rebbe will continue writing. And the Rebbe told him these words. The column that you write, nobody on earth can fill but you. So if you don't write that column, no one else can write it. And there was a man who was writing things, I'm telling you, that were not exactly pro-Israel. There's a similar story with Steinman, where the Rebbe sent, what's his name, Glitzerstein, to see him and told him a fetish not to talk about Yiddishkeit. You know the story. Similar story. And ended up being that he wrote those books on Chassidus in a very powerful way, and specifically because he saw the guy didn't come to proselytize, etc. But the point I want to go back with mission is, let me just go back, I digressed a bit, but it's a Geschmack im Eisen, so I hope you forgive me, was mission. So always in Yiddishkeit, from day one, the Eibush created Adam Mechava, obviously they were on a mission. But the Rebbe made Shlichus into a central component of our time. Why? So this is my svara, and its merum is also in some of the sichos hinted to. Many people think shlichus is to help people, since most Jews are assimilated today, so we go on shlichus to do what? To reach them, to reach the fifth child, because they're not going to come to the table, so we have to go to them. Absolutely. Pekuach nefesh, we have to be responsible for the entire Jewish people, that's for sure. But a lot of people will tell you, shluchim especially, and you can see it also between the lines in the sichos too, that sometimes shlichus is more for the shliach than even for the people they influence. Because think what a shliach would be if he didn't be it wasn't on shlichus. So what does it mean in psychological terms? The concept of being on a mission and feeling that you have that value, that indispensable value, is one of the most important things in our time. I spoke about complacency, about leisure. We live in a time where people do not have mission. You ask the average young man or woman, why are you here? They're watching football, video games, you have internet, you have Facebook, you have millions of options. Why are you here? What's the purpose of your life? Now, it was always important that people had a tachlis b'chaim. That's a given. But in a psychological age like ours, where there's so much free time and so much little focus, mission is like a lifesaver. You're here for a purpose. You're not here to hang around, enjoy yourself. You're here to serve. And the Rebbe makes this a central component. And I would say if this was translated into psychological terms, it can create a psychological revolution, because you give people a sense of urgent mission and purpose. That's the root of most problems. You preempt so much. It's the best way to preempt, because if a person doesn't have that, he can put a band-aid here, and a patch here, and a patch there. What's fundamentally missing is an emptiness. Now, interestingly, Viktor Frankl, logotherapy, man's search for meaning, he developed this theory just a few decades ago. And it's one of the psychologies that the Rebbe writes about. And of course there's a whole story with Viktor Frankl and the Rebbe, again, not for now. But it was just recently. So we say, a man didn't need meaning 100 years ago, 500 years ago? Of course they needed it. But it wasn't as urgent because when people lived at little Shtetlach, and there was essentially, life was simpler, life was very focused on one thing, and which is surviving, it wasn't as critical. Now it's a lifesaver. Because if you don't have that sense of mission, what drives your life every morning? What are you excited about when you jump out of bed in the morning? Or, let's put it this way, you probably don't jump out if you're not excited. What is driving you? And what are you excited about when you, at the end of the day? What have you accomplished? So mission and what we would call, let's say, shlichus, is a central component in making a person a healthy human being in our day and age. I can elaborate more, but that's number one. Number two is persistence. And not particularly in this order, but persistence. Persistence, I'll just share a story that happened with me when I was a kid in Crown Heights. So this summer, it was the Sukkot 1966. So Sukkot, that Sukkot, it didn't stop raining. From beginning of Sukkot to the end of Sukkot. Now, rain in a Chabad Sukkah is a very interesting phenomenon, because the schach that covers the Sukkah is very thick. So, for the first hour or two of rain, that's good. The rain doesn't get through. But once it gets saturated, then it doesn't just come down in drops. It comes down in globs that are unpredictable. And it's not pleasant to sit in a sukkah in the rain. But Chabad won't even drink a cup of water without being in a sukkah. Now, the Rebbe had a custom in those years, had 2 Farbrengens on Sukkot. One the second day of Sukkot, and the second Shabbos Chalamet Sukkot. Actually, there was more than 2. There was Simchas Be'Sheva for the students. But there were a few Farbrengen Sukkos. It stopped, most of them stopped after the Rebbetzin Chomadina passed away, and also the Sukkah was too small, all that. But the Rebbe continued. Later years started giving a talk every night Sukkahs, but that was inside. But the Rebbe Farbrengen Sukkahs, I remember as a kid, I was in 66, I was 10 years old. You can calculate my age if you like. 19, that's what I do when I hear people. 1960. So I come to the sukkah. It was not to hear. I was a kid. I'm standing in the back of the sukkah. It's pouring, and the sukkah was a pretty tight place. And the Rebbe is sitting there, and I could see him speaking, and soaked through and through his coat, and people were soaked, and it was not a pleasant scene. But the Rebbe is Farbrengen, and everybody's there. Later, I heard that it was a Farbrengen that the Rebbe said a mimer. I don't know if you want to say it with a little, a little sense of humor. The mimer was v'shaftem mayim v'sosim, of course. It's just a sukkah mimer, but it also, I guess, fitting to the weather. V'shaftem mayim v'sosim. Like the rains are pouring with joy, drawing the water with joy. And then after the mimer, I think the Rebbe took off his coat and said that, now we can begin because the coat was soaked. Everyone thought it would be over, but obviously everyone was in the sukkah only for one reason, because the Rebbe was there. They weren't there for any other reason. I remember as a child, what impressed upon me was what the impression that it left on me till this day. I don't remember as a child how I processed it then was, ask yourself the question. There wasn't a meal in the sukkah. It's not like they had to sit in the sukkah eating a meal. They said l'chaim, and that was that. They said l'chaim because of the Farbrengen. It wasn't because they had to sit in the sukkah. And we have in America a thing called, I'm sure in Canada too, we have a thing called a rain date. It's raining, so you make a schedule. No, there's no such thing as a rain date. The Rebbe Farbrengen in the sukkah, and it's optional. You can also Farbrengen inside and not drink l'chaim. There's a concept like that too. But the Rebbe had this every year. He Farbrengens in the sukkahs. And it's not a question of a mitzvah. It's a question. This is what he does. And when you do something, you never stop something that's good. Persistence. This lesson remained with me through all my years till this day. I give a class in Manhattan, as I mentioned. I started this class in 1982. Until this day, I still give the class. It's an unbroken chain over 34 years. It's all because I learned this lesson in this episode, and I'm sure others as well, that you start something good, you never stop. It's like the drops of water. Imagine that idea. We live in a world where people, it's not convenient, I'm under the weather, it was nice for a few years, now I stop it. And again, I'm not telling anybody what to do. I'm talking about this lesson. The persistence of the Rebbe was literally infatigable, I think is the word, which means it was unwavering. Everything he did consistently, and he could speak to people. It's like amazing if you think about it, saying to people the same message again. How much patience? 1950, the Rebbe becomes a Rebbe. Who's he speaking to? To 100 people who are refugees, don't have jobs, don't know the language, have no money, and the Rebbe's talking about changing the world. You know what kind of patience was necessary? Like superhuman patience, and again and again and again. Persistence changes things. There's a book out now, a Havdil I should say, called by Duxworth, Grit. That it's all about persistence. It's the grit, how much you're ready to commit. It's not even about skill. It's not about accomplishment. It's about consistency and persistence. So that's lesson number 2. That type of thing, which today is quite rare. Most people, their attention span, what do they tell people? Attention span, 8 seconds, 20 seconds, whatever, 3 minutes, 5 minutes, everything dies before it's almost born. You know, like that. So persistence is a tremendous lesson. Number 3, what I said 3 was Aveda B'Koyach Atzmei, which is the idea of initiating on your own. Right after Yud Shvat, right after the Maimer, Bos Legani, the year when the Rebbe assumed leadership, just afterwards the Rebbe said he's going to make a statement. And the statement he made was, among other things, he said a word, don't deceive yourself into thinking that now you appointed me and I'm going to do the job for you. You say Miksavim, you say L'chaim. No. Everyone has their job to do. I don't decline from helping, but you have to do your work. This became a motto, this became a fundamental principle, which if you think about it, on one hand, it's somewhat of a risk. The Rebbe is not telling you what to do. He's saying, I'll inspire you, but you have to choose to do it. But on the other hand, I would say there'd be no Chabad today if the Rebbe did not use Aved B'Koyach Atzmei. Because after Gimmel Tammuz, people could easily say, you know what? My boss is gone. He's paying me a paycheck from New York. I'm back. I'm going home. The Rebbe made the shlichus and made people's work they should own it. So everyone who does the work, it's like their thing. Is the Rebbe's kech? Of course. But he made it that you have to do your steps. And that is a long, short road to motivate people. It's a lot easier, seemingly, to control someone. You work for me, do this, do that, you order them. It's a lot harder to tell them, figure it out on your own. But it's long-lasting. That way it's forever. Chassidus talks about it. That if it's asusa d'le'ela, if it's an awakening from above, it could be more powerful. But you don't own it. It's not yours, not internalized. Adam reitze b'kav shalei. Person has more pleasure, one measure that you earn on your own than 9 that someone gives to you. And that is a central principle, again, psychologically, in education, in inspiring, empowering people. Himidu talmidim harbe, shalheves ele me'elel. These are all words that Rebbe used, using different chazal, to make the flames rise on their own, to make the student stand on his own feet. You don't just teach people data and information, you teach them methodology. You don't just tell them how to solve a problem. You don't just tell them the solution to a problem. You teach them how to solve a problem. It's a fundamental difference in something that is lasting and everlasting. And there are many, many different examples for this. I'm being brief because of the time, and I want to just go through the other 2 more. Fourth one is unity. Perhaps no one in history brought together every part, both of Torah, of Jews, and of essentially the entire world. Because we all say Hashem Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad, the unifying principle of the oneness of divine unity. However, you'll find throughout history, and even the Chabad Rabbeim, most focused on one kav, on one approach. Is the Rebbe that gathered them all together and showed the commonality, the common threads among all the different sections of Torah. There's a whole kuntus in Yonash Lateres Chassidus that Rebbe delivered Yutas Kislev 1965, Toshin Chavav, where he shows how Chassidus Yechida is that unifying principle that connects all parts of Torah. And of course all Jews. Was there a Jew that's not accepted in Chabad? A Jew that was not received with the same smile and dollars? The Avis Yisrael that connects and recognizes that every one of us, despite what level of your service and how brilliant and scholarly you are, everyone is a integral piece of the Kema Achashtem, of the composite, of the grand musical composition, you could say, of the Jewish world. And for that matter, every component of existence. When Chassidus talks about refining the world, it talks about that ultimately in the last generations, what we do is we refine the last sparks, so to speak, so then everything can be gathered together in one grand unity for Mashiach's coming. The idea of world peace, the idea of connecting all the different paradigms, and so on. So this again you see, and of course very consistent with scientific breakthroughs, where you see the unification, you search for the grand unity theory, the grand unified principle, and other unifying elements that science is understanding multiple phenomena under certain unifying laws. So that's number 4. And again, I'm being very brief. And finally, destination, which we'll call Mashiach. So Mashiach, we all use the word a lot, but at the end of the day, Mashiach is the culmination of the plan. That's what it is. Someone asked you a question, what's wrong with believing in all 613 mitzvahs, keeping them all, as much as we can today, and not believing in Mashiach? Why is it a fundamental principle? Belief in God, understood. Belief in Torah from heaven, we understand. But why Mashiach? And the answer is very simple. Because if God created this world with design, and with a plan, and you believe in that, but the plan is not realized, so that's the equivalent of a captain of a ship leading the ship, but the ship never reaches port, never reaches its destination. So either, God forbid, the captain is insane, or something's wrong. So belief in Mashiach is not some detail. It's the belief that all the work we've done throughout history, every price paid by our parents and our grandparents, the self-sacrifices, every mitzvah is a building block that when it accumulates, it creates a sum total of we call Mashiach. In Judaism, Geula is not an event alone, it's a process. Alter Rebbe and Tanya paid it Klamet Zvov Lamed Zayin, Maseinu V'Avodesenu. Every effort we do is a piece of Mashiach. And all cumulatively, it grows into the big picture of changing the world, like an eruption that comes to a cumulative energy. So Mashiach is not a detail. And of course, the Rebbe made it very clear. At some point, we come to the culmination of this plan. That's what he said in that first Maimer in Bos Ligani in Yishvat, that we are now at that stage. And what I addressed earlier is basically we're waiting for the tipping point of what we have to do to bring it. But it's a very not difficult thing. I find Mashiach to be from the easiest things to explain to people. I'll give you an example. I had a New York Times journalist who decided he wants to do a little story on Chabad. So he said to me he wants to come to Crown Heights. It was Tishrei time. So I told him, why don't you come Simchas Beis Hashem, one of these nights, Sukkot, everybody's dancing in the streets, it's beautiful. I thought that's a good time to come, it's crazy anyway, you know. But he decides he's coming the night before Yom Kippur. Okay. Suddenly I get a cell phone on my cell phone. He's calling me from President Street and Kingston Avenue. Now, I don't know if you ever saw the night before Yom Kippur, President Kingston is not exactly something you want to bring in the New York Times newspaper. Not that there's anything to be ashamed of, but it's like so he says to me, it's a very interesting scene. I'd love for you to explain to me what's going on. So I come running to President Street. There's chickens all over the place. And one chicken was shecht, half shecht, was running around. I mean, it was, what can I tell you? It was chaotic. So he's a smart, very sharp guy. He says to me, so explain this to me exactly. How we but rational, smart Jews, what are they doing exactly here? And then he says to me, when are they bringing the goats? And like he's going to turn this into like a whole, and it's midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning. It had a certain element of, voodoo, black magic, I mean, he saw it as, and then he said to me this line, which only can come from a guy like him. He says to me, the people have a problem with Mashiach. This is insanity. Mashiach makes total sense. The world is going to be world peace, a better place. Jews hang around with chickens and turn them over their heads, and they're going to atone for your sins, and then you slaughter them, and then when all these chickens running around and stuffed into these pails, says, explain that. I can't get that at all. So I realized we have a PR problem, but Mashiach is not the issue. Mashiach is actually quite a very eloquent, poetic concept. Who doesn't believe in a better world? And we could really explain it in a very beautiful way. And as I said, I find it actually easy to explain. It's harder to explain the kaparas, and then of course sukkahs, which is we take it for granted. But someone comes into a shul and never saw this before. We're standing with 4 species. One that looks like a lemon and a citron, they call it, a palm branch, myrtles and willows. If you never saw this before, what would you think? And I'm not obviously questioning it as an explanation for everything, but there's some things that are blatantly more complicated to explain. Mashiach, frankly, is not one of those. Why people find it so complicated, I guess it's become politicized, it's become radical for some, and I understand the reasons that it can come off as that, but it's actually, frankly, one of the most powerful concepts in Judaism that so many other religions and belief systems have embraced. I mean, in the 60s they called it Age of Aquarius. Even today you have people believe that the world will come to a better place where there'll be total peace, total unity, total bliss, whatever you want to call it. And you use the words of the Rambam. Can any have a problem with Perikut Beis and Hilchos Malachim? A time of no famine and no war and no malice and so on. The world will be filled with divine knowledge as the waters cover the sea. So the Rebbe, also in a very, you could say, very rational way, but also a compelling way, said simply, this long process, this long marathon, this long journey that began the beginning of creation, is coming to a close. Coming to the destination of Geula. It's not something, it's actually a very powerful concept. And going back to mission, if the first point I made was mission, will the mission be realized? One of the big lessons we learned from Vietnam. America was in Vietnam. A country like America, so powerful army, could not beat bamboo weapons of the Vietnamese. Explain that. And their answer given ultimately is because American army and soldiers had no clue why we're there. They had no destination in mind. They had no mission. They were just sent there. And the Vietnamese were fighting for their land. So yes, a few little backward third world country can beat the most powerful army in history if they have a focus and mission. I mean, I don't want to even repeat it, but we look sometimes about the passionate, radical Muslims, sometimes are much more passionate than the so-called rational and very sober people who are our allies. Passionate zealotry, as crazy it is more powerful than mediocre sobriety. So there's a lot to be learned when you're on a mission. And a mission means a destination. This is my mission, and here's how I measure results and success. And Mashiach, put in that context, is a very powerful concept. It means we're not just working toward no end, there is an end. Like the Alter Rebbe says in Tanya, when you do a good deed, you release a spiritual energy that changes the world in some way, and when those spiritual energies accumulate, the whole world is changed. So when Chassidus talks about, the Rebbe Sichos talk about the explosion of scientific knowledge today, the world hurling toward a more peaceful world, which is correct. We see democracy and freedom that didn't exist 500 years ago. These are not just accidents. These go back to what I said before, that in the Avir Ha'elom, in this atmosphere, was introduced principles that are getting closer to the unification, what will happen when Mashiach comes. So you see it in the world. You see, as the Rebbe says, open your eyes, you'll see patterns and elements that help us understand that we are approaching, or we're at the threshold of the state of unity of the Geula. Now again, this needs a lot more of elaboration than I'm giving right now, but this is the final principle. You take these 5 principles, and without hesitation, you could demonstrate, yes, how the world would be different without the Rebbe. Chaz v'shalom. He introduced principles that are life-changing, personally, globally. Our job now is to communicate it. You reach enough people, and it could be just as revolutionary, if not more, than Einstein and Freud and even Bob Dylan. Okay? Because these ideas are really revolutionary and they are life-changing, as I said. Just a matter of articulating it and internalizing it and being able to communicate it. And I think we all have, going back to what I said earlier, that we all have a mission to be the mouthpiece of the Rebbe, to be the arms and legs. I think these are just some ideas, and by all means, I wish you all to be motivated to go ahead and find more tremendous lessons you could in the Rebbe's teachings that could help people personally, collectively, communally, and so on. We have challenges in our lives. So why not look into Chassidus, look into the Rebbe's words and see how we can deal with these challenges. We have plenty. And I'll conclude with this. I was once at a TV interview, I think it was in Cleveland, and the interviewer asked me, we were at the last minute of the half-hour interview. He said to me, I see that your book, Toward a Meaningful Life, the Rebbe's teachings, covers so much of life. Is there anything anything that surprised you that the Rebbe spoke about that you'd like to share with us? So we had like 30 seconds left. So I just, what do you say? So I just came up with, yes, life on other planets. Anyway, the show is over. Everybody came running over, the crew, the camera crews, all the people. They said, what did he say? What did he say? Life on other planets. So I told them, you're going to have to get the book. Even though I don't write about it in the book. That was just a joke. So I said to them, 1969, when man landed on the moon the second time, the Rebbe, as usual, he would speak about scientific events and current events, and he spoke about life on other planets. And I gave them the gist of it, which is that basically from Torah faith, Torah view, there could be life on other planets, and one opinion actually holds there is life on other planets. However, it's life that's different than on this planet. Free will, they don't have, and other things like that. But it was very clear that there is, and the Rebbe brought a bunch of sources. If any of you are interested, by the way, just send me an email, and I'll send you the article, or look on meaningfullife.com. I wrote it up in English, a translation, adaptation of that talk that the Rebbe gave. So that's that. So my point that I want to make is that the Rebbe's words, I can tell you, till this day, as much as I've worked in this field, as many sikhs that I've myself written and reviewed and read again and again, I'm constantly amazed at relevant things I find all the time. In the world of psychology, in the world of science, in the world obviously of spirituality and the world of Torah, constant things, because there's so much. The Rebbe was like a Mayinam is Gaber, an endless wellspring, and you just constantly see. Even today I was at Rabbi Spalter's house. I was reading through some letters, some new letters that were recently published. I get emails, people send me notes, constantly new things, and I'm not exaggerating. I wouldn't say it if I didn't believe. I'm telling you, I'm working in this field all my life, and yet I constantly find it there. So it's there for the taking. And the best way to do it is you have a challenge in life. Each of us have our times of challenge with yourself, your family, your children, at work, your personal issues. Look around. Either search or send or contact someone that you trust that knows the Rebbe's words. If you like, I'm accessible. Send me an email. I'd love to be able to help if I can. If you have a question, it can be anonymous. Actually, Sunday night, my life, Chassidus applied. This is based a lot on this, taking ideas from Chassidus, the Rebbe, to answer real life questions. So it's there, and all you got to do is, here's your challenge: find in Chassidus and the Rebbe's words these answers. I don't see a better way to honor Gimmel Tammuz and honor the Rebbe by making him and his teachings relevant to us today. So to conclude again, I came to Farbrengen all night. I don't know what the curfew is around here, but I'm here, so I'm here all night till the morning. So I got nowhere to go, but I want to say, but I do know, they do say attention span of people is how many hours? 6 hours, 7 hours? The Rebbe didn't consider attention spans, I can tell you that. There were Farbrengens that went 5, 6, 7 hours. So I want to wish everyone here, first of all, that everybody should be blessed with the good health and many healthy years, and nachas of your children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, if anybody's in that category, and above all to have nachas from yourself in fulfilling your unique mission. We're blessed to have a Rebbe who gave us that clarity. The greatest gift in life is not just to have a good life, but to have a meaningful life. To have a life that you know what your purpose is. You know when you wake up that this is why you're here, because that creates a tremendous focus. That everything else you do is driven by that focal point, by that drive. So everybody should be blessed in that way. I'll tell you, conclude with a blessing the Rebbe told my father-in-law. He was a bocher, a student in yeshiva. This was the first in 1951. He went into the Rebbe, into a private audience with the Rebbe for his birthday. And at the end of the Yechidus, the Rebbe gave him a blessing the following. He said, God should help that a part of the things the Rebbe wanted to accomplish in this world should be accomplished through you. So I bless each one of you with that blessing, that part of the things the Rebbe wanted to accomplish in this world should be accomplished through you. Thank you very much, and maybe be zeichet to be together with the Rebbe again before Gimmel Tammuz, the Gula, Amitis, Vashlet, L'chaim, L'chaim, L'chaim.